the last problem, board. I promise we're going to be better about this moving forward. Let's just restart everything that we just did so the audio can be heard.
Very good. My name's Greg Moody. This is the first meeting of the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. It appears we have a quorum. Please call the roll.
Mr. Stone.
Present.
Mr. Newman. Mr. Hampton.
Present.
Mr. Giles.
Yes.
Mr. Perky. Here. Mr. Adams.
Here.
Mr. Pelham.
Here.
Mr. Carter.
Here.
Vice Chairman Moss.
Here.
Chairman Moody.
Here.
You
We
have a
do have,
quorum.
thank you. Staff attorney, please read the conflict of interest statement.
The board was created to act for the public welfare and in furtherance of the legislature's intent that utility systems be operated as self-sufficient enterprises. Board members are not authorized to participate in the discussion of or to vote on matters involving entities in which the board member has a financial interest, in which the board member has a conflict of interest, in which the board member has a contract of employment, or if there's any appearance of impropriety.
Thank you. The next item is the public comment period. Is there anyone signed up for that?
There is not anyone signed up for the public comment period. For those of you that are not aware, the law changed on July 1st to require boards like ours for public comment from individuals that are concerned with matters on the agenda. There was one person to sign up to speak on behalf of the Southside Utility District. However, because they are a representative of the Southside Utility District, I would prefer to allow them to speak once we get to their topic on the agenda, if that's okay.
Thank you. We'll turn it back over to staff for board orientation.
All right, orientation day. It's a great day to have everyone here. I'm actually surprised that we were able to get together so soon after the law changed on July 1st. Before we get started with the board member orientation, I think that it would be fruitful to go around starting with Mr. Hampton to introduce yourself, what governing body you're with, anything else that you might all want to tell the class.
All right, my name is Eugene Hampton II. I'm a certified public accountant. I work for Metropolitan Government of Davidson County and Nashville and the trustee's office, which everyone knows collects property taxes, former employee of the comptroller's office and a former employee of Consolidated Utility District in Rutherford County.
My name is Steve Stone. I'm a retired businessman. I currently serve on the board of Middle Tennessee Gas and honored to be here today serving the state of Tennessee. I'm Tom Moss. I'm the representative for the Commissioner of the Department of Environment Conservation.
I'm Greg Moody. I'm the director of the Office of State Assessed Properties for the Comptroller's Office and formerly director of appraisal for the Shelby County Assessor's Office.
I'm Michael Adams. I'm the executive director of the Water Authority of Dixon County.
I'm Bruce Giles, CEO of First Utility District of Knox County. Serve roughly 100,000 people, water and wastewater services in Southwest Knox County, Tennessee.
My name is Anthony Pelham. I'm the general manager of Warren County Utility District. We serve about 10,000, 9,000 customers in Warren and surrounding counties there.
Edwin Carter, and I represent the Comptroller's Office.
Good morning. I'm David Perky. I represent the Lieutenant Governor's appointee, represent the Morristown Utility System Board. I was a county mayor for 16 years of my home county in East Tennessee, and I retired in 2019 as Commissioner of Safety and Homeland Security for Governor Bill Hess.
All righty. Well, I am delighted to see all y'all. The two folks, the two positions that we didn't hear from today, that, as you know, this is an 11-member board. One gentleman that has been appointed is Mr. Nick Newman out of Memphis Light Gas and Water. He's unavailable to be here with us today. I'm kind of surprised that I got 9 out of the 10 that have been appointed so far, so I'm happy about that success rate. There is still one vacant seat that is a representative of municipal utilities. That is to be recommended by the Tennessee Municipal League, and I do not believe that recommendation has been made to the governor yet, or the governor has not accepted the recommendation. Regardless, I have put together a very short 20-slide PowerPoint to talk about the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. For those of you online and in the crowd, we're fortunate to have individuals that previously served on the Utility Management Review Board and the Water and Wastewater Financing Board, with a few folks that are brand new to all of this. So I think that it would be prudent to just kind of give everyone an idea of what we what we do here with the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. Starting off, utility staff. We have in East Tennessee, we have Benjamin Johnson. In Middle Tennessee, for Megan Huffstutter, and West Tennessee, Nate Fontenot. And then down there at the end is our legal counsel, Seth May. I burn him up day and night about a whole bunch of problems that we pursue, and I think that he is ready for me to no longer be part of this board should that day ever come. So the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, Public Chapter 463 combined the Water and Wastewater Financing Board, the Utility Management Review Board. The WWFB was in charge of regulating about 280 utilities. And it was for municipal systems, county systems, and authority systems, and it was for water and sewer only. Whereas the Utility Management Review Board oversaw the 170-ish utility districts we have in Tennessee and UMRB oversaw water, sewer, and natural gas. So that's one interesting thing that this bill did. It said, hey, all of those municipal, county, and authority systems, we're also going to oversee the natural gas now, because there was no reason really to not have some sort of governing body to oversee the natural gas operations as far as what was already being done for those systems that had water and sewer. So who makes up the board? The folks that we just heard from, Greg Moody, Tom Moss, Edwin Carter, Steve Stone, David Perkey, and then 6 governor appointees, which are Michael Adams, Bruce Giles, Eugene Hampton, Nick Newman, Anthony Pelham, and 1 vacant seat that we are just champing at the bit to see get appointed. So what do we regulate? Water, sewer, and or natural gas utilities that are local government utilities only. So we don't do the private systems. We don't do electric systems. Pretty much other than that, there's a few HOA, POA systems that we don't have any oversight. This is strictly about local government utilities that do water, sewer, and natural gas. What do we oversee? Financial distress, water loss, training, and then managerial, technical, and financial capacities. So briefly on financial distress for those that are unaware, what is financial distress? Essentially, the most common topic of financial distress that we see is 2 years of loss, okay? You lose money for 2 years in a row without taking into consideration any grants or capital contributions. That's when this board will get involved. Also in the law is if there is a deficit net position, if there's any default on debt. What's new in this law is an illicit transfer of funds. So illegally transferring funds from a general government to the water fund or from the sewer fund to general government operations, it always hasn't been allowed by the code. However, our board has never had a referral type based on that. So now if utilities are making those illicit transfers, we can bring them in front of the board, because generally that means 2 things. One, that the utility is failing and they are requiring money from another fund of the local government to sustain their operations, or the general government finances are failing and they're requiring the utility to sustain the local government operations, and that would require involvement from our board. Currently, there are 79 open financial distress cases. We're looking at about 450 utilities that our board oversees, so 79 may be a lot. However, it's a lot less than it used to be. A few years ago, there was a change in the law that I'm not going to dive too far into, but that resulted in just a large stream of financial distress referrals to our board. But because of what the boards did, we were able to see that number drop dramatically. What do we do whenever there's financial distress? The first thing that we do as board staff is we send a questionnaire. It has a whole bunch of questions to give an idea of what's happening at the utility. We receive that questionnaire back. Then board staff comes in front of the board to say, we got this questionnaire. This utility is financially distressed. We need the board to order a rate study and order a review of a whole bunch of policies. There's some other stuff that we can order that we sometimes do, but generally speaking, it's a wild thought that by doing a rate study and increasing rates that it can cure financial stress for utilities, because oftentimes we see these utilities that just haven't risen rates in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and all their costs have gone up, but their revenues haven't. So after we order the rate study, we order them to implement it. Once they implement it, we put them in what's called the update cycle. And so I'm going to have one note about the update cycle on the next slide. The point that I'm trying to make is that there are 40 entities currently on the update cycle, which pretty much means that there's 40 entities on the finish line. So out of the 79 financial distress cases we have 40 that are about to be out from board oversight. And so we're really excited to get them out from under us to see how they can continue to improve. So board, one thing that I'm presenting here, and the new members of the board may not be aware of what I'm talking about, but we want to change what the update cycle actually means. What the update cycle used to mean is we would require biannual updates on March 1 and September 1 every year from these struggling utilities. The fact of the matter is this: we didn't use the information for anything that we were getting from these update cycle submissions. It was really a way just to kind of keep the thumb on the utility to make sure that they're on the radar. And honestly, it became more cumbersome than anything for the board staff to receive this information, document the information. It really never did anything that would alter any future staff recommendation, because what we were actually doing is we would just review the audit. Because after 2 years of loss gets you under the board, we figure 2 years of growth should get you out from under the board. So what we would like to do is we would like to make a change to what the language in the update cycle is for all the entities that are currently in the update cycle. And essentially, we're just saying that if you, board staff believes that we should not be required to accept all the information from the update cycle entities, and instead we just want to be able to ask for information from them as necessary, and just make sure that they comply with any requests from board staff, and that we just continue to review their audits. So that is essentially just putting it in how the board operates for what we currently do. I'm happy to field any questions from the board if they don't think that that's appropriate, but I would request that y'all are okay with that change moving forward.
I was going to ask that question.
We don't need a motion for that. I was just more looking for discussion if necessary.
Makes sense.
Thank you, board. Next, annual information report. This is another thing that is required for all of the utilities in Tennessee that are under the board. You must complete an annual information report. It was a bit of a Herculean task to get all 450 utilities to submit this thing, because it is so easy. It is bizarre how many people just failed to do so. For those that have filled it out before, you should know that it probably only takes 10 minutes, especially after the first year doing it. Regardless, we made headway, and now there are only six utilities that have just failed to do so. And there's been correspondence with them. We have no idea why they're not denying it. So what we do is if a utility refuses to submit the report, board staff reaches out and says, please just do this. Just do us a solid. Come on, we need this. Generally, if they don't, we are now going to subpoena the manager and governing body to travel all the way here to tell us in person, why won't you just do it? Because there's not a good reason. And we're hoping that with the threat of a subpoena, it will get people to comply with the very, very simple responsibility of filling out this very simple. So that is the process for the annual information report. And we have those 6 open cases will be in front of us later on today for us to get those subpoenas out to come to the next meeting if they don't comply. Water loss is another thing the board does, and most of y'all are probably familiar with this. So water loss, non-revenue water must be less than 40%. Okay, it is. We're just asking that utilities sell a good chunk of the water. And if you're not selling a good chunk of the water, we kind of want to make sure that you're doing stuff to make sure that you will start selling a good chunk of the water. I mean, that is the easiest way to explain it. So what we do is in the annual information report, get the water produced and you get your water sold. And based on that, we can figure out how many millions of gallons you failed to sell. And we compared that to how many gallons you produced or purchased, and that gives us a percentage. So what we do in cases where utility has shown that they are unable to sell the required amount of water, it results in a referral to the board. We then require them to submit the AWWA free water loss tool 6.0. Once we receive that and review it, we then go back to the utility to say, all right, now that you've done this, what is your plan to address your water loss? Because the point of this exercise is to get utilities cognizant about their water loss, to get them willing to make the repairs and upkeep with the infrastructure to prevent serious water loss. And we feel that 40% is a high enough number because the median water loss based on volume in Tennessee floats around 32 to 33%. And so we thought 40% was a pretty good compromise to get up there to make sure we're not catching too many utilities. So then after we get that water loss control plan, we then continue to review the annual information report to see when they're going to comply. And then when they start complying, we'll release that case from the board.
Do they have to have a third party do the AWWA?
Yes. So the utility that must submit the AWWA to us, they have to have it confirmed by a third party to make sure that the submission.
There have been some that had 1,000% water loss when they filled it out themselves.
I've seen negative water loss. I've seen negative percentage of water loss. So that was a big reason of just trying to make it more simple to keep people in line. So there is one change that I would present to the board for this. In the past, every single water loss case we would bring in front of the board. We found that the entities that are struggling with water loss, they would comply with, if we would just send them an email saying, hey, will you just go ahead and get this done? They didn't need an order from us to tell them to do it. They were just complying. So the change that I would like to do here is board staff will only bring that case in front of the board if they refuse to comply with board staff just trying to work on them one-on-one. It'll cut down the amount of cases we have to actually bring in front of the board, and it'll make it more apparent which ones are just being obstinate and are refusing to listen to us. Once again, asking for discussion if anyone doesn't agree with that process, but we feel that it's better to just bring the bad actors.
Discussion.
All right, so when would, if, we'll say initially they seem agreeing to the other, but then they don't, how long would you give them before, even though they sound like, yeah, I get to it,
Yeah.
but they hadn't gotten to it. So that's not
So-
disagreeing with you. That's just.
They're just being lazy.
Lazy, yeah. So what was?
So whenever we make the request for the AWWA submission, I want to say we give them 3 months. That sounds right. And then, so if they miss the 3-month mark, then we would just bring it up at the next board. And then let's say we get the AWWA back and we then ask for the water loss plan. I think that we do another 3-month thing there. If I recall, I'd have to double check. So regardless, the moment they miss that deadline, even if they're like, yeah, we'll get it to you in like another 20 days or something, that's when I would feel comfortable bringing it in front of the board. The moment they miss that deadline. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I just want to know what was the.
Yeah. So no, whenever we reach out to them, we make self-imposed deadlines that they have.
Okay.
All right, moving right along, training. So another thing that this board does is, y'all are probably all familiar with the governing body training requirements for local government utility governing body officials. So governing body members must take 12 hours of training within 1 year of appointment or election. After completion of the initial 12 hours, you have to get 12 hours every 3 years. And then you have to file an annual training statement to be held locally. This board is what I would like to consider the enforcement agent over this training requirement. And one of the questions the annual information report does request that utilities will self-report if they know some of the board members are not satisfying the board requirements. Because generally what happens here is we have, let's say we have a board of 5, 4 of the 5 are willing to do the training and someone says, no, I ain't no way, I'm not doing this. And it's problematic because one of the what's the word I'm looking for, remedies to the problem, one of our consequences that we can offer, we can impose reasonable sanctions against a utility for not following the training requirements. Generally, we've interpreted that to say, you're not eligible to get out and get any grants or take out any debt until you get your training solved. And so what can be problematic is if you have a board of 5, 4 or 5 are doing the right thing, and this one person is holding them out and causing the entire utility to miss out on opportunities that they may need to improve their utility. So what we would do in instances where there are officials, and there's a few cases on this later, I believe, we would subpoena not only the member that is refusing to take the training, we subpoena the entire board, even the people who are complying. And we're hoping that that applies enough pressure where they'll get the training before that subpoena has to kick in and before they have to travel here. Because we put it in there, we're going to subpoena you unless if you go ahead and just get this training done. At the moment, I think that we have 18 hours of training online for free. So there really is no need for individuals to miss this training, but that is how we handle those. Administrative review. Yes,
Is the training requirements for all the utilities identical, the new ones? Like-
Correct. and so, no, that's a good question. Sorry, I didn't make that more clear.
Do we saw the potential on utility districts to remove the commissioners?
Mhm.
Obviously can't. remove
Yeah, so we
mayor.
can't remove the elected officials, but for utility district commissioners, we do have that authority. And so that is one of the biggest differences that we've had in the Water and Wastewater Financing Board and the Utility Management Review Board. The UMRB had the authority to remove UD commissioners, and we've done that on numerous occasions. Whereas on the WWFB, the municipal county side, really difficult to remove an elected person from office. And so we just haven't been given that authority, and I don't really see that coming down the pipe.
Ross, one thing, does this board have the authority to just simply order that they not be paid until they complete?
So we've never done that. I know that in the law for utility district commissioners, if you don't file a certain statement, you can not get paid. I don't know if the law considers us to have the ability to force a utility to not pay.
I'm not sure either. I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, let's look into that. That's a good question. We'll make a note and we'll get an answer for you there. And not only on the utility district side, but even on the other side of things for, elected officials for any payments they get. So let's look into that. That's a good
It
question.
seemed like a fair thing to do and a direct thing that I believe would have an impact.
Sure.
Of
No, good input. We'll look into that.
course, if they continue to pay on, that would show it up in the audit finding.
Absolutely. Okay.
That's interesting because you do have the authority to make them go back and repay all that they've been paid if they haven't filed the annual report, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll look into that. Thank you. Anything else on the training? Moving on, administrative review. Both boards may be used to this being called investigations. And I'm not going to lie, it has taken a whole lot out of me to not call these old board investigations any longer. Instead, we are calling this putting a utility under administrative review. Why? Because it gets really confusing when there's a comptroller's division of investigation, and then there's our board doing investigations, and people really get those confused. So in order to alleviate that confusion, we just started calling it, putting them under administrative review. The power didn't change. We're just calling it a little bit something different to help utilities not understand the difference between, a DOI investigation into fraud, waste, and abuse versus what we're doing, looking into financial, managerial, and technical capabilities. So the language of the law says it evaluates the utility's ability to comply with state and federal statute. We're looking at the managerial, financial, and technical analyses of things. We're able to order a pretty broad array of things to remedy a lot of things that can be found in a utility that's under administrative review. I need to call that something better. I think we're AR case. We'll think about this because administrative review is a mouthful. So we're gonna have to think about this. Regardless, we have 7 open administrative review cases, and we will be discussing those later. Merger authority. This board has the ability to force 2 utilities of any type to merge. The Utility Management Review Board previously had the ability to force a financially distressed utility district to have to merge with a good utility district or any utility. When this law changed, it expanded the authority of this board to say it doesn't matter if you're a city and a utility district, a county system and a city system. If there are 2 utilities, one of them is financially distressed, based on that financial distress recommendation, we can start the merger process. That merger process involves a feasibility study being ordered by this board, followed by a public comment period held by us wherever the merger is occurring. We then bring the findings of the feasibility study and the public hearing back to the board, say whether or not we still think that merger should continue. Then the board would then order, if they think the merger is in the best interest of the utility, the board would order that the 2 utilities enter into an agreement regarding the merger. If the utilities fail to enter into an agreement or one isn't operating in good faith, then the whole thing goes to the Chancery Court. And so everything that our board does is enforceable through the Chancery Court. So at that point, if they're not able to reach an agreement, then we go to Chancery and figure it out there. The other interesting thing is that this isn't explicitly limited to financial distress. If there are entities that perhaps are under administrative review and we find that, yeah, this utility isn't financially distressed, but they are barely skimming by and, it's a very small utility and they're buying all their water from their neighbor. There's no real reason for this utility to continue to exist. This board has the ability, based on the findings of that administrative review report, to start a merger case. And so that was one interesting thing that changed in the law, because there are several utilities that may not be financially distressed. However, they aren't doing any services to their customers by continuing to operate on their own.
Boss, question. Could a customer petition initiate that same administrative review?
So a customer petition could initiate the review. A customer petition could not initiate the merger. And so that is, I think I have a last slide about customer complaints, and we'll talk about that briefly.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So the Utility Revitalization Fund.
Hey, Ross, I think we
Yes.
got one more comment.
Oh, sorry.
In the previous slide, it says between any type of utility, so a municipality and a public utility, no problem.
No problem. So yeah, I mean.
Either direction?
Either direction. So we could force a utility district into a county. We could force a UD into a city. We could force a city into a county. Obviously, if it's a city or something, the governing body still continues to operate. We don't make the city disappear, but the utility would have to give up, its assets. Utility Revitalization Fund. So this was another thing that was part of the law regarding mergers. This was previously known as the Utility District Revitalization Fund, and it was limited to instances in which the Utility Management Review Board ordered mergers between a financially distressed utility district and a healthy utility district. The law revamped this fund, pretty much say, now that you can force any types of mergers, any utilities are eligible to use this fund. Also, if you have utilities that are going about a merger on their own and aren't requiring board action, they're also eligible to be reimbursed for certain things from this fund. So whereas before it had to be a board forced order merger, now it's anyone. If you're doing a merger and you think that you're eligible for some reimbursement of costs from this fund, your case can be brought up in front of the board to see if we're eligible to give grants out. There's currently $2 million in that fund. Anyone who knows anything about utilities knows $2 million ain't a whole lot of money. So maybe one day we'll get more. I think that our board could do a lot of good work by helping subsidize mergers where needed, because a lot of times it's the cost of the merger that prevents utilities from doing it. And we actually have one request already for disbursement from the Utility Revitalization Fund, and we'll get to that later in the meeting.
I think we have some.
Ross, where does that money come from?
Comes from the state. So
Just state appropriation?
yeah, so a year, not this past session, the session before, they appropriated $2 million.
This has to be a clear intent to merge before the money is applicable, correct?
That's the thing right there. We, and not to jump too far ahead, but I do want to answer your question. The case that we have in front of us today, the reimbursement request, it's kind of like a thing. It's like, maybe we're thinking about merging. We're helping them right now. So if you can help subsidize the help we're providing, that would be great. And maybe we'll eventually merge. Whereas in my opinion, and the opinion and what the law says, it's like, no, we're gonna merge. So we need to go ahead and get some of this stuff paid for to make the merger occur. For me, that's kind of the checkbox is this money necessary to make the merger occur? And if it meets that basic litmus test, I think that's when we can find other things to nitpick with it. But if it's not going to help a merger occur, then I don't think.
I think there's some money available through the state revolving fund. Well, or all those other big money coming in.
Correct.
They
And
could
so
help mergers too.
yeah, and so those aren't, and a lot of that money isn't explicitly for mergers, whereas this money is.
Right.
But the interesting thing about this is if y'all are familiar with a little bit about utility accounting, when the law changed in 2017 to say that grants and capital contributions cannot count towards your bottom line, a lot of people were mad. And a lot of people became financially distressed on that because a lot of people were relying on grants and capital contributions to keep their books afloat. So the law changed. That's when we saw a whole bunch of referrals come in for financial distress. So what we've actually done with this fund, based on the feedback that not only we were getting from locals, but a lot of state senators, state representatives, a lot of the executive departments, everyone says depreciation is the problem. Depreciation is hurting us. We need help. We can't do a merger because of depreciation. As much as anyone with an accounting background knows that that's just so false. We thought, well, let's try to figure out a way to extend an olive branch, because depreciation is just a boogeyman. It's not a real problem. People just say it's the problem. So the thing about this fund is this is the only grant available to utilities that will count to your bottom line. And here's the reason that we did this. Let's say that I'm a utility, I'm a good utility, and I want to take over a bad utility. And I know that their rates have to go up significantly. If you're part of a utility, you know that a lot of what you do is based on public opinion, right? And so it looks really bad. If you're a good utility, you take over a bad utility, then you raise their rates 30%. You're just going to have a handful, right? So what we're able to do, because the good utility is doing a solid for the state of Tennessee, we're able to say, oh, you want $500,000? We'll give you $100,000 installments, like an annuity. That counts towards your bottom line. So what that can do is it can float the books a little bit to where instead of doing a 30% increase right off the top, you can kind of build that up over a few years because of essentially compounding interest. You raise things 3 or 4% a year, you can eventually get up. So this was a middle ground for utilities to say, depreciation is the problem, please help us. There is somewhat of a solution now. However, the kicker is you have to be willing to merge with the surrounding utility. We're not just going to float your books for a few years for you to then be back in the same position that you were in. So it's, you want to help your community. You think depreciation's the problem. No, the problem is you only have 300 customers and your population is dwindling. That's the problem. So start looking at a merger, and we're able to subsidize that so your customers aren't hit with huge payments all at once. I think that is a very important distinction to make with our fund versus other funds. And like I said, $2 million is going to take us far, but I think that if we show we're doing a lot of good with it, we'd have a good case to try to get more in. Any questions?
Replenish the fund, what happens? You got to go back to the legislature and request like it's brand new again.
The legislature would have to
A
reapprove.
one-time thing.
Yeah, so we didn't get a 2 million reoccurring. It's a 2 million one time.
See what you do with it.
See, yeah. All right. Customer complaints. So this was previously only for utility districts. The Water and Wastewater Financing Board had no oversight over customer complaints, okay? These complaints can be based on, according to the law, on the justness and fairness of rates, customer developer requirements to build infrastructure, lack of or ineffective policies or controls, and failure to reasonably extend services to customers within the service area of the utility. Okay, so the customer can go to the local governing body and say, hey, I need to make this complaint. And then they get a decision by the governing body. If they don't like the decision by the governing body, they would then have the opportunity to bring it in front of our board. So as far as petitioning, your question earlier, can a customer petition for administrative review? Based on what the petition said, as far as a complaint, if there is enough in that complaint where we may say, we're not ready to make a decision on this, but it seems like there's a lot of problems going on here. Let's have board staff go in, kind of verify what this customer is alleging based on their complaint, and then we can go at it from that point. Does that answer your question?
So technically, one customer with a valid concern could justify this type of action.
Yes. Yeah. The one other interesting thing about this is there was an amendment put on the law when it was going through because there was concern that any customer could petition this board to take action and we would have to at least hear the case. That is not the case. The complaint would come to us as board staff or the comptroller's office. And then us as board staff or the comptroller's office would then make a referral to the board to say, we think that this is a legitimate. Because anyone who's involved in a utility knows that y'all get a lot of stuff that often doesn't warrant, a legitimate complaint. So it could have been a huge headache for us, just us getting a whole bunch.
You basically, you guys get to vet it.
We're vetting it first. That's essentially what it.
And I do like the customer complaint because I'm familiar with a situation a few years ago where a small utility actually had a petition where they obtained more than 10% of the customer base. The utility hired an attorney to fight that petition and got the petition thrown out of court before it ever come to the UMRB. So,
Oh, the Chancery Court.
yes.
Would that potentially lead to, for the customer developer promise there, if the complaint was, I think most utilities, any on-site facilities being built, would be clearly responsibility of the developer, or the customer, but potentially that capacity or off-site infrastructure upgrades may not necessarily be there, are going to be assets of the utility. Is that going to be the topic that would come to this board potentially?
Somewhat. It'd be more if you're. It's kind of hard to talk about all the hypotheticals, but essentially, if the utility is forcing a developer or a customer to install a lot of infrastructure that is kind of more than what they should be responsible for, could be because the utility is being lazy, they don't want to fool with it. What it boils down to is any case that comes in front of us, you have to be able to explain why you did what you did. And if you can make a rational argument of why you made a developer do something, or why your policies are in that, or why your rates are set like that, we're going to hear you. Because we all know that not every utility is the same in every situation you need. But like I said, it's not wise to come in front of the board and say, yeah, we just didn't want to, we just didn't feel like doing it.
An example of that's my utility came in front of this board, the previous board, because of capacity reservation fees. It was justified, it was thought out, but the developer didn't like the answer that he got at my board meeting. Therefore, this board, I recused myself from this board. My staff walked through the rationale, and then this board ruled on whether or not I was just.
Right. Yeah, a lot of it just comes back to the math. And if you have math showing like why you're doing what you're doing, then I don't think a utility should be concerned. And that is a point that I want to make about the last point here, failure to reasonably extend service. This was a contentious issue during the legislative session as well. What does that mean, to reasonably extend service? The bottom line is this, like, if you're looking at 3 properties along a highway and one on either side of the middle property both have service, and you just, don't want to run service up to that middle property, you better have a good reason. And generally, if there's no capacity, there's no capacity, right? But if it's, I went to the rival high school from that guy and I hated him for years, I ain't doing it. That's not okay. And it's surprising about how many times in rural Tennessee we see these issues.
Yeah.
So it's just there to protect utilities and customers.
Crude rule of thumb, and y'all probably know better than I do, but if you can't get like 15 customers per mile, it's not, and that may be low or high, I'm not sure. But anyway, you can't extend 20 miles of a line for one customer.
ECD standard for CDBGs.
Is it 8? Okay.
Or used to be.
Yeah. I don't remember. I had an engineer tell me that.
That's not low. I mean, yeah, it's.
I do the environmental reviews for my division, and I always check financial distress too. But if they're trying to do 15-mile water line for 3 customers, and they're already under financial distress with us, that's like
it's not going to get any better. Or be expecting to charge those customers an arm and leg service. The one thing that I failed, and you mentioning that kind of made me remember this. One thing that I failed to put in that PowerPoint is one other important part of what we do, because this doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's important, is our board has the ability to approve or deny new utilities. So if you're a city and you've never offered water service and you want to start a water treatment plant, you have to go get all TDEX approval for doing that, but you have to come to us and show us why it's going to be financially feasible, because we're trying to get ahead of the situations where the city thought it'd be a good idea to put a massive sewer treatment plant in for an industrial park, then no one showed up to the party, and now there's only 2 customers, not the 500 that they were expecting. And so those are the things that we try to get ahead of. So a utility would bring that case in front of us, showing financially how it's going to work, And we have the ability to approve or deny that action.
We've also seen cases where they're private entities that like, hey, we'll form a utility district. Because then we can get federal dollars or state dollars, and we've turned that down before.
Yeah. Okay.
Planning commissions, where do they come into the picture here to approve or disapprove of the standards between utilities and developers? Who trumps who? The utility or the planning commission?
Utility.
Utility?
All right. Well, that is my very short, I don't know, what was that, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, orientation of the board. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful for y'all. I'm sure it was helpful for the folks online that don't really know what we're doing. But otherwise, if there are no further questions about how this board is set up, what we're doing here, because I want to stress this board is extremely important. A lot of people don't realize what we do behind the scenes, but I mean, at the end of the day, we make lives better for Tennessee. And it's a very important responsibility that I think that we have. So with that, I think that we are able to move on.
All right, next agenda item, attorney discussion.
Yeah. The first part is the public comment.
It's the first one to the public chapter 300 that Ross mentioned to a couple of times requiring public comment. The Attorney General's office has issued an opinion that we need to make that a rule. We have a policy to consider that I would recommend adoption of for now, and then eventually we will draft rules for the board. I've been thinking about things that we need to pass rules on. The things I've come up with are the application process for the Utility Revitalization Fund grants. That's the general requirements, not the substantial requirements, but the procedural requirements, the order we want to see documents in, what we would request, what to put in your initial application, and then deadlines for processing that. Also, writing down and making formal how we handle cases on utilities that are on the update cycle, and how we handle water loss cases. And then I would like to retain the conflict of interest statement that we read for the meeting. It's currently a rule because we inherited all the rules of the UMRB and I would like to keep that in our new rules when we draft those. And then just one other point of clarification outside of the rules. All business at the WWFB and the UMRB under the public chapter, that all carry on over to T1. So anything that Utility Management Review Board or the Water and Wastewater Financing Board did, this is all still binding, all still in effect unless we modify it.
So,
and as far as rules go, if y'all have any thoughts on the rules that you think we need, this is going to be mostly procedural things, not necessarily substantive. I would be willing to listen to anyone who has thoughts on it. So you can email Ross Wright, or we can talk about it after the meeting, or if y'all have thoughts right now, I'm happy to.
So ultimately, one thing that we do need is to vote on the policy regarding public comment at meetings that is found on page 27 of the board packet. If we could get a vote on that, I'll talk about the other rules. If we could just go ahead and get that adopted, as long as the board's okay.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to adopt.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the guidelines for the public comment at meetings rule. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, it is my understanding, though, that even though it's 2 minutes, that the chairman, at your discretion, has the authority to extend that if you want to. Is that my understanding?
Would that need to be explicit in there? Like, let's say someone was talking, the chairman could allow them to go past 2 minutes, or that should be at the discretion of the chairman.
Point seven
Says that, I think.
Oh,
Sorry.
I should have done my homework a little bit better, huh?
I just want to make sure that that's
I
okay.
appreciate that.
Because just to be fair, I've never seen one 2 minutes. It's usually 3 minutes or 5 minutes. It just seems to me that, I'll vote for this. Just understand me, but it seems
I'm completely okay if we want to extend that longer.
to me that by setting a 2 minute limit that we're saying we're not interested in hearing you. The standard in public meetings it's either 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And of course, chairman has the authority to extend that, but I mean, I'll vote for it.
See, I kind of like the 3-minute rule too, instead of 2, for the same reason.
I don't see any problem.
Sure. If we amend the motion, can we be clear that we're adopting the rule, the policy as written, except for changing it to 3 minutes?
I'm agreeable. I'll amend my motion to that.
Okay, thank you.
Sector.
All right, we have a amended motion and a second to adopt the written guidelines for public comments to 3 minutes instead of 2. Everything else remains as written. Any further discussion?
So was the 2 minutes, you said that was state law, that was the,
So the state law didn't say how long it had to be. 2 minutes is just kind of the number that we pulled out. So
Okay.
I'm completely amenable.
no, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a state
Yeah,
law. So
no.
when we were extending, which is not, okay, I yield.
And to be clear, Chairman, since we don't have any members participating online, we can just do voice votes today.
All right, so we have a motion and a proper second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. All opposed, motion carries.
So the one other thing that I wanted to note about the rules that Seth was talking about is board staff will probably reach out to everyone individually to see if that they have any suggestions and to share the rules before we go and adopt them. We don't really have anything else in front of us today that we need to adopt. We just wanted to kind of put it on everyone's radar that as we're trying to get this train going, we're going to have rules and, policy things that we just have to get adopted. And so at any point, if y'all have any questions about rules, you wake up in the middle of the night, all you can think about is the keyboard and its rules, and you think about, shoot me an email. Don't call me. But no, y'all just let me know if you have any rule suggestions or anything, we'll be good to go. All right, Chairman, I think we're ready for the next.
All right. We'll move right into the next agenda item, which is board manager discussion and cases.
All righty. Well, y'all are probably used to our boards operating a little differently. You're used to me just up here rambling for a few hours and y'all just get to look at them. But the difference now is I'm going to have my own portion where it's kind of the more high profile cases that require a little bit more attention. And we're giving the other board staff the opportunity to address the board about their own cases. And so I think that this will be a good way to get everyone kind of more involved with what is happening at every single one of their utilities, because often I'm not the one directly communicating with some of the easier going utilities. So it didn't make much sense for me to be the one communicating what's going on. So with that, we're going to start with my portion, which is the board manager cases. And we're going to start with the annual information report compliance referrals. Y'all remember earlier, I talked about several utilities that have just failed to complete the annual information report. These are the 6 out of the roughly 450 utilities that since this law passed a few years ago, they just have not done it. So board, I'm requesting that we say by September 29th, so the end of September, file the information report. If you don't do it by then, we're going to subpoena you to come in front of the board. So does anyone have any discussion on that?
I make the comment there, Ross. If I'm being a manager of a smaller utility district, we wear a lot of hats, but I can tell you, I personally have done hours and it only takes minutes.
Oh,
You get a PIN number from them, you plug it in with the database, it's filled, plug and chug as you go. It's primary contact information, who it is on site, name, email, fax, who the board president, who the signatory is, the MOR information from any of your documents for produced versus sold covers it's 5 minutes is gracious, especially after the first time once you log in. And so for it to not been done now, which this started last summer, the 22.
I think the summer before that.
So it's been ongoing. I know this year it was basically log in, update the date, click enter, go information. It's the same. So it is a very rudimentary contact information. I think it just gives the comptroller who do I call in case of a problem? Who the certified operator is. I firmly agree with that. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'd move to accept staff recommendations.
We have a motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendations on the annual information report delinquencies. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, board. Next, we have training compliance. Earlier, you heard me ramble on about the training requirements for board commissioners or local government body commissioners. Sort of city councilmen, that's the word I've looked. So we have 7 here, 7 utilities that have reported, or we found out one way or another that at least one person on the board has failed to meet their training compliance requirements. So we're offering by September 29, 2023, the entity shall send proof that all members of the utility are in compliance. That if they don't, we'll issue subpoenas for them to come to the next board meeting. But if we get the proof that everyone has submitted it, we will kind of just dismiss the case.
Is that the entire board?
Well, yes.
Even though some of them have.
And the manager and the governing body. So
The further away they are from Nashville, the more.
yeah, the more it hurts.
I'm gonna be irritated if one of my board members
Oh, yeah.
lacks 3 hours and he or she. won't
Yeah, there'd be a
do it.
little verbal incentive coming.
Yeah.
Can we require them to be in the same car?
And you have free online.
Yeah, when we have 18 hours for free online, it's really hard to make an argument why you can't, because I know that they're sitting home watching Netflix instead of watching.
TAUD things are everywhere.
Yeah.
I make a motion, we accept board recommendation.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to accept board recommendations on the 7 utilities lacking in training requirements. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So next, board, there are 5 utilities that have complied with all of the board directives up to this point regarding their financial distress. So we're requesting that essentially we take no further action against these utilities. We put them into the new update cycle, which is board staff just reviews the audits until we believe that they're in the necessary posture to be released from the board. However, they will have to respond to any additional requests for information from board staff, and we can bring them back in front of the board for enforcement at any time until we officially release the case from oversight. Because that is one thing that I didn't fail to mention earlier, is this board has to vote to release a case from under the oversight. So it's not like they're in the update cycle and we have no ability to bring them forward. It's not until we make an active vote to say this case is closed. So
You said the prior March and September dates were arbitrary, that comptroller didn't require specific other action, but just now be as needed.
correct.
Chairman, I move we accept staff recommendation for the update cycle.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendations for the update cycle. Further discussion? None being, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, so next we have our first utility revitalization fund request from the city of Mountain City for the assistance that they are currently offering to the Carterview Utility District. Over the last month, I have been involved with the Carterview Utility District because back in early 2023, their manager, which is pretty much the sole employee of that utility, gave the board notice to say, hey, as of June 30, I will no longer be. You're going to need to find someone to help run the utility. Well, that board didn't choose to, they chose to not do anything until the beginning of June. And so they started scrambling to try to find a manager, but not only that, an operator. And so there were several meetings between Carterview and Mountain City and other utilities that are in the area about who is going to essentially start running this district. So where it ultimately landed is Mountain City agreed to help Carterview until July 31st, 2023. They're gonna, they're at the easiest way to put it is they're gonna be running the district. And so Mountain City has requested funds from the Utility Revitalization Fund to subsidize what they are doing with Carterview. I don't have a doubt that the purpose of this fund would help if we knew Mountain City were going to merge with Carterview Utility, or Carterview would be going into Mountain City. However, we are not sure of that at this point, especially because they're telling us that the agreement expires on July 31st. So board, I I don't even think legally we could approve this disbursement. Because they're not saying that a merger is going to occur. We're not subsidizing the cost of a merger. We're just subsidizing a managerial agreement. I don't even think that we can.
There's no merger agreement.
Right.
As much as I would like this problem fixed, from my division, I agree.
Yeah.
Is this not as simple as an MOU between the two of them saying we're entering into a merger? And
Yeah, can we
here are
tell
the
them they
steps
have,
we're going to take to make this happen by this date?
So
can we tell them they have to merge?
so let me answer this question twofold. Is first, the reason that Mountain City hasn't really agreed to say, hey, we're going to be merging with you, because one, Mountain City has shown that they're willing to merge with other utilities. Mountain City is currently in the middle of a merger with the Cold Springs utility, and that is a very small utility district up there. Whereas the case with Carterview Utility District is they have, from my understanding, keep in mind, I ain't no engineer and I don't know as much about water treatment as y'all do. They have a unique sand filtration system for their water supply, okay? And the Mountain City operator has pretty much said, I don't quite know how to run this as well as I do.
It's a slow sand filter.
And
Only one
he says, I don't want my name to be responsible for this because I don't quite understand it. And I don't want to be liable if anything were to happen. I totally understand that. However, that is completely railroaded conversations for Mountain City to be, the future for the Carterview Utility District.
And on top of that, they can supply some of the water anyway, but they would have to increase what they take out of a spring at Mountain City. And my division isn't going to give them the permit to increase the withdrawal.
So
it's
in the ideal world, what happens here is Mountain City agrees to eventually merge with Carterview Utility District. They figure out what to do with the Carterview water supply to where they're comfortable with running that system. And then they can come back to the table and say, we need some money to help make this happen. But that's just not where we're at. And so
Asking for a loan before you fill out the application. Or asking for the money before.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So on the environmental side, Carterview has a different source of water.
They've got wells.
They got wells.
Or maybe it's spring, I don't remember.
I think it's a spring.
But
It's not the
it's
same.
what we call under the influence, so they got to treat it like a surface water.
But they pull from different.
Right, correct.
Bodies of water.
And the trick is they're across the river from Mountain City. Or no, that's
They're
Watauga.
across the river from the Watauga River region.
Watauga River Authority would love to take them over, but they don't really have the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah, so the thing about Watauga River Regional Water Authority, or whatever, Watauga, there is a bridge that if they were to become the water supplier for the Carterview Utility District, they would need to run a water line across this bridge, and TDOT is saying no.
It's like 800 foot worth, and they're worried about the bridge already.
Yeah, and so the thing is, this could all be solved if Watauga were able to run a line over to Carterview, supply all the water. Mountain City takes over Carterview and just runs it using Watauga's water supply. I think that is a pretty reasonable thing, but we just haven't gotten the negotiation there essentially. So that's where we're at. The reason why Watauga, from my experience with Watauga, why Watauga couldn't run essentially Carterview merge into Watauga. Watauga is them being a river regional authority. Their main goal isn't to be a utility, it's to be a water supplier. So they are a huge wholesaler of water to several other utilities in the area. So they aren't really staffed to run a utility per se. They do in a few other small places, but that's just not what they're built. So they should be the water supplier. Mountain View should run it, or Mountain City should run it, but we're just not there yet. So all that to say, I do not think that we can approve this based on the law.
Just a suggestion too, it may be a short-term help to move this along. Maybe Mountain City should call TAUD and have a circuit rider come up there and get them comfortable with that sand filter. I don't think that's a
So,
really complicated thing to do.
They don't have to be manned. They're in a situation, they don't have to be manned every day.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they've got some controls, but
And I will say that since this agreement has happened, that the old manager has stuck around, helped show, hey, this is a little bit how you do it. And I actually think TAUD might have been up at the end of last month. But I agree with you. If at any point Mountain City isn't comfortable with it, there are resources available to say, here's how you do it. I personally think that Mountain City, while they're doing 100% everything right this month, I think that they should continue the agreement. But ultimately, it's Carterview's responsibility. And they drug their feet for a little while trying to get this thing out.
Mr. Chairman, just to get a motion on the floor, I would move that in the absence of a merger vote by local governing bodies, that we deny the request.
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion and a second to deny the disbursement request. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, moving on to the town of Mason. Y'all may be familiar with Mason and their interaction with the board. Previously, the board ordered Mason into administrative review. There were several issues with the utility at Mason, and we visited there, it's kind of crazy, almost 2 years ago now, to figure out what was going on at Mason. And there were a lot of managerial deficiencies. There were a lot of operational deficiencies. And one thing that they have to do is they're in the middle of trying to get a rate study completed. That rate study is not complete yet, really to no fault of anyone. It just takes time to do these things. However, TDEC has recently issued some notices of violation against the utility. And they, in discussing this with TDEC, I thought it was appropriate to bring these matters in front of the board to see if that there's anything additional that we can do. And the one note that I do want to make, or kind of ask Mr. Moss to explain TDEC's position here, is during the cold snap that we had back around Christmas, Mason experienced a lot of issues, like a lot of utilities did, right? However, a lot of those issues, in my opinion, took a little while to get fixed, maybe a little bit too long, based on complaints that we were getting from customers. And so one of the solutions that I've tried to offer to the town of Mason, because they are having issues with an operator and their water supply, is why don't you pursue running a line to the Poplar Grove Utility District, so you become a purchase-only system. And based on my conversations with the Poplar Grove Utility District, they don't see an issue in doing that. Or B, look into a merger with the Poplar Grove Utility District for Poplar Grove to essentially run the utility for Mason, as our board does a lot in a lot of these instances. Both of those suggestions were received extremely poorly. The local government has no desire to fix their water supply problems by seeking help from a surrounding utility. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Moss for explanation from the TDEC side of things.
Okay, our Memphis field office has been working with Mason since January. They don't have a certified operator for sewer or drinking water. And they're dragging their feet. Well, last Friday, they were sent NOVs. The mayor actually asked for the NOVs because he can't get his board to cooperate. And so he's in there trying. He's a new mayor. The other problem, well, the board says they don't want to spend the money. They don't think they need certified operators. Well, yes, they do. But normally we require within 30 days, you've got to have if you've lost your certified operator, you've got to have a certified operator. Well, and we might give them a 30-day extension, but that would be 60 days. This is since June. And the other thing they have is they've got a lot of water leaks and outages. Even the mayor didn't have water at one point. And the customers aren't able to reach anyone. They can't leave messages or anything else when there's water out. And that's just not, we don't feel that's accessible.
I might have missed it there. Are they under any TDEC commissioner's orders?
Not at the moment, but they're fixed. They're on the list.
But this is a
I'm the
pure
one that
public
writes the
health
orders.
issue, correct?
Do I?
This is a public health issue at this point.
Yeah, yes.
Well, you can read the letter here, and I mean, they've got all these people running around. They don't seem to have an advocate.
Now, the other thing you wouldn't know from the previous board is they had a criminal investigation and some folks may be going to jail.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. So they got this, the HR, the finance director. Have they paid the money
Oh,
back?
yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
Yeah, they also were borrowing money out of the fund that they're supposed to put back.
Yeah, they borrowed.
Oh, that money, yeah, so they did pay that back in full. Mason used the ARP money
Okay, so
to,
the utility is financially whole.
they got their, what, $600,000 back.
Okay, but they don't, but it's still falling down.
Mr. Chairman, is this the case? I might have read about it a little bit, even though I'm from East Tennessee. Did the comptroller actually go down and meet with them?
Yes.
himself?
I was there.
Yes.
And they didn't, city officials didn't respond to that well. And, okay, I think I remember.
Mhm.
Yeah, didn't the comptroller threaten to dissolve Mason or something?
We don't have any authority to dissolve a city.
I've got that. Well, it wasn't
Yeah, no.
some sort of hammer.
So the issue, the issue was essentially the town wasn't being able to provide adequate service to its citizens. And the citizens were paying fairly high property taxes for little to no benefits. And so the idea is, what is the purpose of these relatively high property taxes for no benefit? That was essentially the message there.
I knew there was a hammer.
So is this not a justification for forced merger?
Yeah.
I mean, I would think so. I think that if we look at any instances that we've ever looked at forced mergers, I feel like this is kind of fitting the criteria when it comes to the financial health, the service being provided to the utilities, and for the environmental and the health problem.
Literally, this is a public health issue. I just keep circling back to that.
Tom, if you're saying they're not having any certified operators since
January.
Since January,
Where do they care, it sounds like?
I mean, you're talking about chlorine, sanitary.
Well, now they're on wells.
I understand that, but still.
But yeah, I mean, you still can't tell whether they're feeding chlorine or.
0.2 chlorine residual in the system, so that
Yeah.
it's sanitary.
I think they've got somebody operating, but they're not certified. And again, it's.
Yeah, from my understanding of the correspondence that I've seen from TDEC, there is one gentleman there who was around whenever we did the investigation 2 years ago, whenever the board went and visited. And in my opinion, he seemed knowledgeable about it. However, he doesn't have the licenses, right? He doesn't have the classification. So by all means.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate, I noticed the Chief Investigative Counsel is here for the comptroller. Would it be appropriate for me to ask him, as you're able, to talk a little bit about any criminal inquiry just at a 30,000 foot level? And again, I'm not asking for anything that, you're not able to share.
Good morning. My name is Mike Donovan. I'm the Chief Investigative Counsel for the Comptroller of the Treasury. I can't really give you a whole lot of detail other than to say that as a result of investigative reports that the Comptroller has issued over the last year and a half, multiple city officials, both current and previously employed by the City of Mason, were indicted by both the Tipton and the Fayette County grand juries. And those criminal matters are still proceeding in the circuit courts of Tipton and Fayette County. Those reports are a matter of public record, and you can see them on the Comptroller website. Those indictments included a former HR manager, former financial manager of the town, and 2 police officers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Prior to this meeting, I was under the impression that perhaps the mayor of Mason was going to travel here to maybe address the board, but he is not in the room. I don't know if he's online. Chairman, if you're okay with it, I would like to see if he's online, allow him to speak if he would desire.
Please proceed.
Yes.
All right.
You hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Yes, my name is Eddie Norman. I'm the new mayor of Mason, Tennessee. I'm trying to give up-to-date information about the situation in Mason. 6 months ago, when I take the office, we have a lot of issue with the system, and because for long history, nobody take care about the water and the sewer system. And I did a lot of improvement according to my resource, and I fixed a lot of leaks. We used to lose over $1.4 million. I'm sorry, 1.4 million gallons, almost monthly. Actually, right now we cut it. We fix over 20. We find out 25 leaks. We fix over 15 leaks. But right now, we under the contract with a new director take over his license, he's qualified, and hopefully we can finalize the whole deal maybe within a weeks. Regard about the situation, the financial situation with the city, with the comptrollers, I'm working closely with the comptroller. We have a meeting every 2 weeks. We got up to date everything. The budget, we catch it up with the audit, with the budget is approval from the comptrollers. Matter of fact, in the history of Mason, since I have been there, I put $600,000 in the CD, earn a 4.5% interest. So we have a little bit money in the account available. The only thing I did actually, I'm watching all the transaction daily, and we're in the right direction. And I got a lot of support from the comptroller office and the local community and the citizen. I know the speed is not enough to do all the damage what happened for all this year, because like I mentioned before, we're supposed to care about our water and the sewer system, but nobody take care of it. But I'm trying to do whatever my best of ability to take care about all this situation. Regard about last December, when I take over, we have a serious issue with the substation in Highway 59, and the customer complaint, called the state, calling everybody. But right now, the state give us close to $2 million to upgrade this system. Actually, since I have been there right now, we don't have any single complaint, because we fix a lot of leaks around this area, take care of it temporary until we solve all this problem what we have. I apologize. I suppose I attend to the meeting up there, but I have some issue here in the city. I cannot leave to take care of it, and hopefully within a week or two to finalize the contract with the director to be over the system here. By the way, right now we have Mr. Mark Walker and Mr. Matley Hall watch closely what's going on in the system until we got the new director to finish our problem. But financially, we're doing great. We're not in red anymore. The system, I have to change some certain people around here, but I'm working on it. But we head in the right direction, and we got a lot of support from the comptroller office. We got support from Ronnie Niels and Ms. Kay and the county mayor. We head in the right direction. We making big progress. We suppose, like the comptroller tell me, actually, Eddie, he did for 6 months what we suppose did it for almost 20 years ago. So we have money in the account. We catch it up with the budget. We watching all the transaction. I bought $600,000 in the CD. The utility right now, I got 2 companies coming up there to check everything. Want to be sure everything is up to date. The only issue what I used to, was I still have it is the director was certified license to do it, and finally I find it, and hopefully we don't need extension for another 30 days. I'll be on it. So this is a brief about what's going on, but you need a lot of work actually, because Mason, I know we have mismanaged fund for a long time, and we're doing a great job, honestly, with my team, with some new people I bring in the board up there, and also with the growth coming with the mega site. Actually, it's the first time in the history of Mason we have a 4th subdivision coming up, so we're ready for the growth. We already approve it, and the construction start working very, very, very soon. But we did our homework, and should be everything is headed to the right direction. So the town is grow. We everybody pulling together. I know I have some issue with some city council members. Just try to stop the progress, but we're working on it. But Mason, overall, I invite everybody to come in here to see the system by yourself, and you have the judgment about how we do and how we operate it. And I appreciate it for everybody to help in Mason, and we try to do the right thing, and we hit it to the right direction, and I appreciate it. Does people hear me?
Thanks. Can you hear
People
me?
hear me? No.
Unmute.
Opposition. It sounds to me like he's altruistic in what he wants for the town of Mason. So even though we're sometimes perceived as a hammer board, I want to compliment leaders when they stand strong like he is.
Thank you. Ross?
Yeah, so I actually echo a lot of your comments. The mayor is correct in that he, working with him, he's been, fairly cooperative with our office. And so we are very appreciative of what he's doing for the town. However, I myself have been told by numerous individuals that there is still a lot of contention at the alderman level with what's going on there. And I know that can be problematic for the mayor. As far as the financial health of the utility currently, I'm really not able to comment on whether it's financially healthy or not, because are they up to date on their audits? Are we still waiting on one? They're up to date. And so based on that last audit, I think that it showed things trending in a fairly negative direction. And they haven't had a rate study done in quite some time. And they haven't had a rate increase, a significant one, in quite some time either. So regardless, financially, I'm not super confident yet because the rate study work has not been completed. I do have concerns from a public health and safety standpoint, not to mention, this is all from the drinking water side. They do have wastewater issues, and I know that they've been working closely with an engineer that I've been speaking to on trying to solve some wastewater problems. And I know that I think that a lot of that is in the works. However, in talking about the growth that Mason could see from the Blue Oval City, the first subdivision coming to Mason, subdivisions can't happen unless there's healthy utilities around. And so, again, if they're experiencing these issues with the, trying to remember off the top of my head, 800, I don't want to quote it. It's a really small utility. And so if they're having this many issues with that small of a system, I'm not sure how they'll be able to, which is why I advocated for perhaps at least hooking onto the Poplar Grove utility. So earlier, Mr. Giles, you mentioned that perhaps this is a really good case for a forced merger. Currently, that is not in any order that we have directed to Mason. So should that be needed today, we would have to order a feasibility study into the feasibility of a merger between Mason's utility and surrounding utilities.
Could you, in general, Ross, could you comment to maybe the integrity and capacity of some adjacent utilities?
So I'm really only aware of the Poplar Grove Utility District. Unfortunately, that's a part of the state that I'm just not super familiar with. However, Mr. David Braden, I believe, is the manager of the Poplar Grove Utility District. And I've been able to speak with him on a few occasions, not about Mason, just Poplar Grove issues. And I'm quite confident that they are a very strong utility. I mean, I've had conversations with him just on numerous issues that he shows that he cares about.
So there's a potential there.
I feel that there is a strong potential there. And you wouldn't be going from bad to worse or bad to bad. I think it would be bad to good.
What about something regarding getting the certified operators that we subpoena the aldermen up here? They don't get it within a.
I mean, I think that is completely acceptable, that if they fail to meet the requirements of TDEC for getting certified operators hired, that we subpoena the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to come in front of the board to explain why they won't hire adequate staff.
It concerns me greatly that they thumb their nose to the need for certified operators, not to public health. I keep saying that's a public health issue. It just blows my mind.
So essentially what I believe we have here is two things. One, subpoena language if they fail to meet the requirements of the TDEC orders to get certified operators. Should we put do the NOVs have a deadline by which they have to get those?
I don't remember. Normally we do 30 days, but it's been a lot longer than that.
August 15th. So I'm not going to lie. I don't know if we'd have an order to them by August 15th. So we can reference August 15th, but they might be getting it right at that same timeline.
I'll make a recommendation that if by September the 1st, they have not complied with a certified operator requirements, then we ask staff to evaluate merger. I don't know if that's the correct way to.
Okay.
Or not, but by September the 1st, we take action if there's nothing before.
So to be clear, if the town of Mason fails to comply with getting certified operators on staff for both water and wastewater, for both water and wastewater by September 1st, then the language we would have to use is then the city shall engage a third-party consultant for a feasibility study into a merger with the surrounding utility.
Absolutely.
As approved by board staff.
Yes.
Yes.
We'd like to specifically including Poplar Grove.
Yeah, we can
Poplar
specifically
Grove by
include
name.
Poplar Grove utility. Also, Mr. Moss, you mentioned subpoena language. Do you also want to say that if you don't comply with the September 1st deadline, that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen be subpoenaed to come to the next meeting of the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation?
Yes.
That as well. So
I have one other modification. We would also accept staff recommendations, so they provide proof of implementation of the study and implementation plan.
yes, and I'm glad that you brought that part up. We almost got away from what I wrote, right?
Sorry.
I do want to mention that part specifically, and then we'll circle back to everything we just discussed. You'll see this language a lot today. By December 31st, the entity shall provide. What we're doing is a lot of the rate studies that are currently outstanding, a lot of them have deadlines of July 31st or maybe some in September. We have so many rate studies outstanding that the consultants completing the work are having trouble getting them all done in time. So we're pretty much pushing them all until December 31st. It's not because the utilities aren't doing what they need to. There's just a lot of work out there right now and not a lot of people doing it. So you're going to see that language a lot today, and that's what I am offering for Mason. And I want to be very clear, based on my conversations with the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts that's completing the work, it's not because they haven't been able to communicate. I think there might be some issues with records, but normally I wouldn't want to extend it if the city's just saying, no, we ain't doing it. And that is not the case. So I think to summarize everything is we're going to maintain the original staff recommendation. We're going to add by September 1st, if the utility does not hire a water and sewer operator as required by TDEC, then the utility will contract with a third-party expert as approved by board staff for a feasibility study into a merger with Poplar Grove Utility District or other surrounding utilities. And if they fail to meet this deadline, then the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will be subpoenaed to come to the next meeting of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation.
We think that meeting will be in October.
That's what I'm recommending. I see that being October. And I mean, we haven't gotten to the point of discussing, but if it's not October, it'll be November.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
I like to second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendations with the added language of the subpoena if they have not complied by September the 1st.
And the third-party independent feasibility study if they miss TDEX NOV.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, moving right along. So now we are at the city of Spencer. For those of y'all that have been involved with the Water and Wastewater Financing Board for quite some time, you are aware of what's been going on in Spencer. Spencer, in my opinion, has been one of the biggest failures of a utility trying to comply with state statute that I've seen. I mean, it's pretty gross about how bad that utility has gotten.
By the way, an order should be signed this week.
And what would that order be for?
A disinfection byproduct violation.
Okay. So fortunately,
About a year for it.
I can say that the city of Spencer experienced a change in administration in I think that was November when that election was. And the mayor, Elisa Farmer, right? Farmer? Okay.
It's Lisa.
It's Lisa. It's ALISA. Yeah,
Okay.
Elisa Farmer. She's been doing a lot. I can say she's been doing a lot. She's trying to get the city back on track. And board staff, we are incredibly appreciative for everything that she's done. However, one of the previous directives of Spencer was you really need to start a conversation with the Warren County Utility District to figure out a way how to make this thing work. Because the Warren County Utility District isn't very far from the city of Spencer. And I've attended a meeting at the Warren County Utility District to kind of hear from the board. And the Warren County Utility District isn't completely saying no. They're just saying we have to kind of figure it out and lay a lot of the groundwork for this to occur. But it's my understanding that the city of Spencer, those talks have kind of gone quiet. And so one thing that the city is at risk of losing out on is, for those of you that are familiar, August 8th is the deadline for the TDEC competitive grant funds. And this is a great opportunity to find grant funds that are important for regionalization between the city of Spencer and with the Warren County Utility District. I currently don't have a recommendation because I don't know if we have the authority to force the utility to try to enter into a grant application with the Warren County Utility District. I don't even know if the Warren County Utility District would be wanting to do that. I can say there's a fellow on the board who represents the Warren County Utility District. So naturally he would, I would think that you can't vote on this matter, but if there's anything that you're able to provide to the board to try to provide some context, I think it would be appropriate.
Yeah, so once again, I'm Anthony Pelham. I'm the general manager of Warren County Utility District. We are the adjacent utility. And Spencer also has a emergency interconnection. They are also a customer, so a small portion of their system we do provide them with water on a different basis. To give further context, in a prior occupation, I was the consultant engineer and have worked and done consulting engineering work in Spencer since about 2005 or 6. They have certainly had their trials and their challenges with multiple failures, disinfection byproducts, water quality, manganese. They continue to face those. Today, I can tell you that there have been no substantive talks between Spencer and Warren County Utility District over the last 4 to 5 months. There was an initial discussion after Mayor Farmer was elected about a potential management agreement that was not amenable to Warren County Utility District. And I can tell you, at least from comments that my board has made, any discussions would want to be certainly held to the level of concern to provide safe, dependable drinking water to the customers. Obviously, in small rural towns and in certain areas, people are very defensive of their territory. and the portrayal that Warren County Utility District, which we serve into 6 counties, our name just happens to be Warren County, to portray that we're trying to invade and take over is not our goal.
Yeah, our staff is saying that it's a turf thing, that they want to.
That
they're
appears
standalone.
to be some of the jargon. I don't think Mayor Palmer has had that. I think she certainly exhibited a concern and certainly done more in her 6 or 7 months as mayor than the prior mayor had done in many years. It really is at this point, do they have the resources, the ability, the manpower to turn the ship around? And part of it is truly their source. They have a small lake.
Right.
They have a connection to the college, to the Caney Fork River.
Right.
But they pull primarily out of a surface water lake that has a high iron manganese content, and they use membrane filters that foul very frequently. And so at this point, I can tell you, all things being equal, my board would rather them be able to stand on their own 2 feet and us provide assistance. We've continued to do that through some staff and some equipment and materials, and just kind of do that as a neighboring utility as we would for anyone else. But at the end of the day, I know my board's heart would be to do whatever's necessary to make sure the customers are taken care of. It's not a feather in Warren County's cap at all.
Sorry, I do believe the mayor of Spencer is online. I don't know if you'd rather, I didn't know if you would want to ask her a question as well.
Well, mine was really a structure.
Okay.
Question. And I called in your initial comments that they're also a customer.
Yes.
And you have an emergency
We have a
connection with them.
1 2-inch meter connection with them on Highway 30, but they serve essentially into at least 2, if not 3 hydraulic zones because of we're right at the toe of the Cumberland Plateau.
Right.
And so there is a limitation to where they can serve into their system without additional pump stations and then line sizes to transmit enough volume of water up to the actual city proper area. We're able to serve down in the lower valley portion of their system for a portion of it.
So I do believe that the mayor of Spencer is online. She was earlier. I don't know if she still is. If it's appropriate, board, I would welcome her to speak. I'm not sure if she wants to, and that's fine if she doesn't, but I figure if she's online, she could.
I think that's appropriate.
Mayor Farmer, I don't know if you can hear us, but if you would like to say any notes on the topic of Spencer, we would appreciate it.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Since I took office in November, I have been able to put in place rate increases for the Spencer utility. We have already had one increase go up in February of this year. We have another increase happening in August, and then 2 more increases next year to try to pull us out of the financial strain that we're in. I've also hired Nolan Campbell as our water plant manager to try to get our water treatment in a better quality than what has happened in the past, and he is working diligently to do that. We are also in the process of doing an aquatic study right now on the Caney Fork River to try to meet the requirements of the environmental side of everything that has to be done prior to running the water line from the Caney Fork River up the mountain. We're also in the process of, we have signed an agreement about a week ago to purchase the land to put a new pumping station up the mountain. This agreement is to be able to do some study on the land to make sure that it is feasible to hold a pumping station. If so, then we are in hopes to be able to purchase that to assist in this pumping station. And there's a lot of efforts being made to try to, we've also applied for a CDBG grant to try to replace some very old water lines within the city limits of Spencer. We will not know until fall as to whether or not we will be able to receive those funds, but we are making efforts to try to get our utility in a better financial state. We have, as Mr. Pelham spoke, I did have a meeting with him shortly after I took office. It's not that we are trying to oppose a merger. It's just that I didn't feel like that I wanted to make a decision on the merger until I was at least had my feet on the ground and be able to do some changes as far as managerial things and financial changes and stuff. Another thing, I have also increased our fees, which we had assistance with TAUD in order to see how we were on some of our fees as far as installing water line and meters and such. All of that went into effect July 1 with the increase. So efforts are being made to try to get us in a more better financial state than what we are, but we have a lot of things that's got to be done to our water system and our water lines in order, whether or not we merge with Warren County or whether or not we stay as an independent utility. We have to do these capital improvements in order for our people and our customers to have better quality water. So efforts are being made on our part. I just hope that the board understands that we are, or I am trying to lead this sinking ship into a better direction. So any kind of understanding and grace and mercy that you all can continue giving us for just a few more, a little bit longer, would be greatly appreciated.
So one thing that I want to add is, as board staff, I don't deny anything that Mayor Farmer. I just think that we have to look at the reality of the situation for the city of Spencer. What happened with Spencer's utility wasn't a result of 1 year of bad management or 2 years of bad management. The result of many, many years of poor management, and that has put them in a very difficult financial place. It has put them in a position where they have a declining customer base, if not, it may be stagnant, but if not, it's declining. It put them in a position to have really high utility rates. And if all of this work is necessary to improve the utility, it's only going to make those rates need to go up higher, right? I believe that the Warren County Utility District has the resources to help alleviate a lot of that burden that is currently on that system and those customers. Furthermore, if what the mayor is saying is true, and there is a lot of work to that system that needs to be done, and I can tell you it is true, there's a lot of work to that system. There is no reason to let an opportunity go by for a competitive grant from TDEC that can help alleviate the cost of those if the cash isn't available to pay for those. So personally, I don't have a staff recommendation currently out there, honestly, because I didn't really know if we could order them to pursue a grant. Currently, the city is not under an order for a feasibility study into the possible merger between the city of Spencer and the Warren County Utility District. But those are options. And another option is we let Mayor Farmer to continue to try to bring this thing back around. And again, I do commend her for everything that she's done because she hasn't went in there and sit idly by. I mean, she is making progress, but progress, it's taking time.
I don't want to dispute what you said. Eugene, you may remember, but I thought on the WWFB that we did order some type of, I don't know if we called it a feasibility study, but we ordered something to the effect to look at what the possibility of a merger would look like. Did we not do that?
See, I don't think that we called it a feasibility study
Because
because we didn't have merger authority at that
Right.
point. So if we needed that to start some sort of merger requirement, this board would need to order a feasibility study to occur.
Okay.
I think that we ordered them to talk.
Yeah.
That may have been what it
And
was.
so I think it was pretty vanilla language, just saying y'all need to talk to them and see what occurs. But outside of that, the old board just didn't have any sort of.
I understand that. Felt like I need a feasibility study to me.
Also, kind of stepping back to from serving on the WEAC committee, though, I don't know that there is time now for that other 200 million pocket of TDEC ARP dollars to create the scope of work in time.
You got 2 weeks, basically. There's
Yeah, what I will say is, could we ask, if the board wants to go along with that, could we just request that they attempt to work with their engineer to try to make that August 8th deadline? And then if it doesn't happen, I mean, it's not on them, it's,
We can attempt, but they won't make it. I'm working on 2 right now. These things are so.
I will say, Nathaniel Green has been very involved with Spencer. So I
engineer for both.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe I don't know. I think that we can request it. I think we could request that you at least try to make the August 8th deadline, but I think that's all we can do. Regardless, though, what Mr. Adams said about requiring a feasibility study, that is a rational recommendation.
The other trick is what are they gonna do with the money if they apply for it? Run another water line from Warren County or? I mean, we can't require.
Too far out of line.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
No,
Back to my history with them, and then I'll take the adjacent utility. Honestly, as far back as 2013, I made the recommendation to previous mayors that they should have requested Warren County to merge in 2013 when I was their consultant engineer. But I also told the mayor then, if I was Warren County's engineer, I'd recommend Warren County not take it.
I think Daniel Green said the same
So,
thing.
you know, that's
He's-
and that's
he
my
had told me the
professional
same thing.
engineering with a PE stand behind it. Because it's not from a pure, financial standpoint, it would be a challenge for them to take it on, or for Warren County to take on Spencer, but the need is there. To me, it would be a straightforward comparison from dollars. Do you look at the source they have? I can tell you is probably one of the toughest sources to treat, particularly with all membranes in the state of Tennessee, just for the iron and manganese concentration.
Yep.
So it'd be a financial comparison of raw water source, in my opinion, in Fort, or having enough capacity in Warren County to build a line to offset that and pump up the tanks. Part of that's going to be the distance and head, because you are coming on plateau and you're dealing with nearly 1,000 feet of elevation difference.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when we pump up on Highway 8 at another location, we have 2 staged pumps that go up. And so to me, you're looking at time, you're looking at total capital costs to be able to look at which one of those from a volume standpoint would be most financially viable and feasible. And then which one from a long-term for growth, if you're doing that, it's not just to satisfy today, but you're looking at 25 to 40-year growth period to be able to support whatever would happen in the region in that area. Other alternatives that may be there, maybe those present themselves in the feasibility. I just don't know about the timing. I know we have had internal discussions, not directly in meetings with Spencer, but with this pocket of money, that may be an alternative for the allocations for merger and region.
Yeah, the problem with TDEC was we'd like this money, we're gonna spend it somehow, that ain't gonna cut it.
Right.
Yes.
So,
to have a plan, is to say that would be the hard thing, the scope and time to meet the
Right.
Sure. So, what I'm understanding is that the board finds it feasible the board finds it feasible to ask for a feasibility study regarding Spencer and the Warren County Utility District. but it's not feasible to ask them to try to meet the August 8th deadline for the TDEC ARP, which is fine. I mean, y'all know about that more than I do.
I think it'd be extremely difficult. Now, you know a lot better the circumstances, but I'm just telling you, my utility has been like Bruce, we've been working for months trying to put our application together, and I think it'd be extremely difficult.
And that's totally fine.
I think we were one of the first in the state to get into the GMS portal, and I think I'm the first that's still waiting on a reimbursement back from the first draw that's come in. And
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
Especially because we'd have to have special call meeting advertisements and then have anything else for our board to authorize.
So with that being said, I don't know if the board wishes to make an order at this point regarding a feasibility study. I don't know if there's anything else that's really necessary to order at.
I'd like to make that motion to order Spencer to conduct a third-party feasibility study of a merger with Warren County Utility District.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to order the city of Spencer to conduct a third-party review of a merger possibility with Warren County Utility District. Is there any further discussion? None being. All those in favor? Opposed?
Please note.
Abstained from Mr. Pelham. Motion carries.
All right, board. I would like to get through Watertown, and then I think we should take like a 10-minute break.
Mr. Chairman, what time will the sandwiches be delivered?
Not answering.
This is going to end up being the cheapest board I've ever served.
Yeah, for sure.
We are cheap, yeah.
We're part of the comptroller's office. You know, we don't know.
I should have never entertained this.
All right, so I will say, after we get through this one and the next topic, the rest of the meeting should go pretty speedy. These are the more.
Sure.
I'm just trying to keep y'all around, not get you too mad at me. All right, so with the city of Watertown, this is similar to the case with Mason as far as TDEC has had a plethora of notices of violations and such going to Watertown. So much so that I probably could have doubled the size of the packet if I included every single document that Tom sent me with the documents that TDEC has sent to the city of Watertown. So I don't really have a recommendation here other than the board should discuss potential actions against the city of Watertown, because based on my conversation with Tom, and I'll let Tom correct me, y'all have tried to fine Watertown and they say that they're not paying, is the crux of what I'm hearing. But I'll let Tom discuss.
The order turns into an agreed order and drags out over a year or two. And there's some of the things that we've been dealing since 2012 and they're still not doing.
Now, Tom, when you say every order, you're talking about commissioner's orders.
Director's orders.
Okay,
With us,
director's orders.
commissioner level
There's a difference.
is 100,000 or above.
I understand.
But your director's order, yeah. Orders are typically taking over a year to negotiate out. The mayor is an attorney, if that tells you anything.
I think he's been the mayor for like 40 years.
Yeah. But we issued the last order, drinking water order we issued was August 8th of 2022. We still don't have the agreed order. That included a violation for going without an operator for a year and a half, certified operator, water loss issues. There were previous agreed orders signed in 2008, 2009, 2016. Some of the same issues have come up in sanitary surveys from 2016, 2018, 2019, and 2022. Goes back as far as 2011. There was a consent order on the wastewater side signed October 15th of 2015 after the appeal of a discharge permit. That took a year, over a year to get to the agreed order thing. The upfront penalty on that order was $17,000 with contingent of $156,000. And it's still on that agreed order is still ongoing through 2015. But everything gets low walk.
Yeah, it sounds like TDEC's at the end of the rope with Watertown. I mean, what more can be done to try to get Watertown in compliance? And that's why I don't really know what to recommend here. I mean, one thing that is possible is we could subpoena the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and maybe utility manager to come here to try to discuss it in front of us to figure out why they won't fix the problems. You know, we've had issues financially with Watertown before, not even just on the utility side, but as far as our Division of Local Government Finance goes. There have been, if I recall correctly, there have been issues with interfund transfers from them. Steve, does that sound right?
Correct.
Yeah. So they've had issues with interfund transfers from funds where they shouldn't be making those transfers. So, I mean, I don't know what else is the point that I'm trying to make. I think at best we can subpoena them and talk to them. I don't know what there is to order other than comply with TDEC's order, you know?
What about an administrative review? Is that under?
And we could definitely place them under administrative review. And have board staff go and try to, because right now there's a whole lot of unknowns with the system. And I'd be more than happy to have a staff go and try to figure out more about Watertown to see what can be done to remedy their problems.
Sounds like we need to understand what is under the hood before we make a recommendation.
I had one thought, Tom. Are they just obstinate, or does he take things to Chancery Court?
He's never taken it to court.
Okay.
Well, we've taken him to court.
You've taken him to Chancery Court?
I'd have to go back and look at the details, but yes, I believe we did at least one time.
Who are their neighbors?
I don't think that there's a whole lot of close ones, but Lebanon would be the closest utility, I think.
But they're true groundwater wells. I mean, it's not a
that's why I looked over
system to run.
So it turns out it would actually be the West Wilson Water.
Oh, that's true.
Wilson County Water Authority, the Water Authority of Wilson County, whichever one. Chris's utility, the authority in Wilson County, the Water Authority of Wilson County, however you want to say it, they appear to be the closest utility to Watertown. However, I think it would be premature for us to go into feasibility study talks right now. I think going into administrative review and us looking about how close they actually are to the Water Authority of Wilson County. What is the Wilson County Water Authority?
The Water and Wastewater Authority of Wilson County.
That water and wastewater, that's the one that I was looking for. Yeah, so do a administrative review of the utility, figure out how close they actually are, and come back with some findings for that. I think that's a reasonable way to go from here.
Isn't there a statute on commissioners operating utility in the best interests of their customers? Aren't they in violation of some law? I mean, if this is not in the best interest of the ratepayer, aren't they criminally responsible? Am I wrong about that?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to say if they're criminally responsible. I think that we could make some sort of determination during the administrative review as to what the language of the law says for the responsibility of the governing body members. But I would say that the spirit of the law says, yeah, you need to run your local government in the best interest of the people that you're trying to serve.
I understand this is local government, but a public utility, I mean, we were told when I was involved with a merger once that you got to run this in the best, you always got to be thinking about your customer, your client.
Yeah. And it gets
your fiduciary responsibility is broken.
Right. And that's where it gets weird when you're dealing with a municipality versus a utility district. So not to say that you're wrong, but I'd be more than happy to look into that. I think that you're.
Winds me up here.
Make a recommendation that we direct staff to do an administrative review of this organization.
All right, we have a motion for it.
I'll second.
We have a motion and. Go ahead, Ross.
Sorry to interrupt. I really don't like doing that. Generally, I believe during our previously investigative orders, we do have language in there that if the utility fails to comply with staff requests during the administrative review, that we're able to issue subpoenas for the utility to come in front of the board to describe why they refuse to comply with board staff requests.
Modify my recommendation to that.
All right, the motion is to accept staff well, it's not staff recommendation. The motion is to request the staff to do an administrative review of the city of Watertown. And we have a proper second. Do we have any further discussion?
Ask one question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dunaway, I hate to put you on the spot again, but as a former district attorney and former U.S. attorney, before we get too far down the road with this administrative review language, which appears awful weak to me, if a DA is not conducting a criminal inquiry, but they're conducting an inquiry, is there another name for that?
Mike Donovan, Chief Investigative Counsel, Comptroller. So to the extent that any person in this room or any person in the state of Tennessee believes that there is fraud, waste, or abuse in a publicly funded agency, we would encourage you to report that to the Comptroller's Division of Investigations through the hotline, fraud reporting hotline, which also has an online reporting form. Fraud, waste, and abuse is exactly what it sounds like. It can be financial fraud. It can be waste of government resources, and it can be abuse of positions of power or authority. And we will certainly review those matters. We have a statutory duty to review fraud, waste, and abuse allegations. More particularly, to answer your question, district attorneys in Tennessee are primarily tasked under the statute with prosecuting criminal violations of the law, of state law. However, district attorneys, county attorneys, city attorneys, and the attorney general and reporter of this state all have concurrent jurisdiction and authority within each of their purviews, districts, counties, or cities, to initiate ouster proceedings of public officials based upon either willful misconduct in office or dereliction of duty or willful neglect and failure to perform the duties of the office that they hold. That is a civil proceeding, but all of those attorneys that I mentioned have the power and authority to initiate those civil proceedings based upon a lower burden of proof than what is required in a criminal matter, which is, of course, beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. So there are multiple different statutory remedies that may be available, and they don't always go to a criminal matter. That would require some investigation by some agency, which can include the Comptroller's Division of Investigations, but it can include other agencies such as the TBI or local law enforcement. And so it's hard for me to answer beyond that statement of the current law.
I guess I was looking for the term administrative review. Is there a better term for that? Well, Ross, you referred to this in the beginning, and we might talk about that term. Yeah. But is there a better term you can think of? And also for the record, I don't mean to infer that there's any criminal activity in Watertown. That's not what I'm talking about. But I was looking for a way that we could say that we're conducting this review or inquiry by staff, without it getting to your division.
I'll leave that to Ross and to Seth. I think they're well and better suited than I am to answer that question regarding the TBOR here. Often, Comptroller investigations from my division are presented to this board, and those findings can be considered. But likewise, what you may be, I'm not exactly sure, but what you may be authorizing by administrative review is some report of findings from these employees and staff members of this board.
That
So,
may be the best term then. Thank
all
you.
right, thank
You take care of it. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, at the end of the day, Mr. Perky wasn't trying to change what we're doing here. He's just
No.
saying administrative review is kind of a weak term. And I mean, I get it. It doesn't really change what we're getting at. So I think that, we can keep kicking the can around, see if we can come up with something better down the road. But so what I understand,
We have a motion and a second to direct staff to do an administrative review of City of Watertown. And if we have
an additional subpoena language.
with the additional subpoena language. And we have a motion and a second. Yes.
With respect to TDEC, are there any other than the director's orders that are in place and are still outstanding? Are there any other teeth, for lack of a mind, enforcement actions that TDEC has over and above?
Feel like if you had, you'd have already done them. So, any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? None? Motion passes. Can we go into a short recess? 10 minutes. It is 12:10, so at 12:20, we will start back promptly. Are we ready to go, Ross?
I believe that we're ready. All the board members look to be back. Appreciate everyone who's still sticking around. Hopefully, board, this is one of the longest meetings we ever have, but I ain't making no promises. Fortunately, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to go on and waste everyone's time. Let's just get this ball rolling. So next board is the WIT Utility District. If you are a part of the Utility Management Review Board, you may be familiar with the WIT Utility District. Before we get started, because I don't know, is there anyone online as a representative of the WIT Utility District that wishes to address the board?
Ross, I don't know if you can hear me or not. Dewey Brandstetter, I'm counsel for the WIT Utility District.
All right, Dewey, I did hear you loud and clear. So how I would like to proceed is read what I have in the packet. And then if the board finds it acceptable, they will then address you to address the board. All right?
Okay, I've not seen the report, so this will be the first time I've heard about it. I may want to, I don't know how prepared I'm going to be able to appropriately and adequately respond, Ross, but I will do my best.
Absolutely. Yeah. This was posted in the packet this morning based on the conversations that we had with the commissioners yesterday.
When was it posted? Because it wasn't on when I got it this morning about 8 o'clock. I went online and it wasn't on then. So
yeah, it was probably about 9:05.
Yep, it's on there now. I just downloaded it.
Okay.
During the meeting. So
Thank you, Eugene. All right. So sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I always feel like it's good to declare conflicts early. This is my home county. I personally know the parties that are involved here. I have two conflicts. The first conflict is that I'm a member of the Morristown Utility System Board. So I declare that as a conflict. And the second conflict would be that I'm also the grand jury foreman in Hamlin County. So from this point on, I'll keep my mouth shut, which may be welcomed by my colleagues.
Thank you.
All right, board. So as I did previously with the WIT Utility District at the prior meeting, I would just like to read verbatim what we have in the packet. So on July 18th, 2023, staff to the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, the board traveled to the WIT Utility District to meet with WIT Commissioners Michael Rouse and Michael Fagan. The purpose of this meeting was to comply with the Utility Management Review Board's directive for board staff to meet with these commissioners to decide whether ouster proceedings should be pursued against them. Board staff's recommendation to begin ouster proceedings is unchanged from what was provided to the Utility Management Review Board in June of 2023. Board staff is pleased that the WIT Utility District is considering several changes to policies and the employee handbook to help satisfy some of the findings of the May 2023 Comptroller Investigative Report into the WIT Utility District. I will say that I don't have this written, but Dewey was kind enough to share those with me on Monday, and I've been able to briefly review them. I haven't went full on into them, but I do think that it is remedying a lot of the issues that were highlighted in the investigative report. I'm unable to say whether it's exhaustive about everything that was in there, but I mean, it definitely shows progress in doing what needs to be done. Board staff is not aware that any changes have been implemented at this time. They are waiting to vote on these until the next meeting, whether it be special called or regularly scheduled. And I don't foresee that the board is going to have any opposition to the policies that are being presented. The Witt Utility District has engaged an accounting firm, the MG Group, for services in relation to the last 2 audits of the utility and the investigative report. The engagement letter between the MG Group and the Witt Utility District states, "We will apply the agreed upon procedures which the Board of Witt Utility District has specified, listed on the attached schedule, to address concerns raised in the investigative report issued by the Tennessee Comptroller of the Treasury dated May 17, 2023, and to review the annual audit report to be issued by Crane, Thompson & Jones PC for years ended September 30th, 2021 and 2022. This engagement is solely to assist the board and management of Witt Utility District in determining the accuracy of the reports mentioned. Mr. Fagan and Mr. Rouse stated that the purpose of the MG Group engagement is to find deficiencies of the Witt Utility District, which were detailed in the investigative report. Mr. Fagan and Mr. Rouse also both described the investigative report as being vague. The commissioners contend that the MG Group has been engaged to clear up the alleged vagueness of the report. The only 2 parts of the report that they explicitly stated were vague are in relation to the overtime provided to Mr. Ben Harris and the questionable disbursements totaling at least $5,243. When the commissioners were asked about the overtime work by Mr. Harris, both Mr. Rouse and Mr. Fagan stated that this overtime was in large part due to the fact that Mr. Harris was completing 2 separate jobs, the role as field supervisor and the role as general manager. One thing that I'd like to note here is the reason that Mr. Harris was completing 2 roles is Mr. Harris's father, Terry Harris, was previously the manager of this utility district. He unfortunately passed away in 2020. And after that fact, the board named Mr. Harris to be the new general manager, and he also retained his role as field supervisor. They both also stated that Mr. Harris was working overtime during the time period in question to do work for the potential expansion into the Chestnut Hill area on the other side of the lake from the district. The commissioners both confirmed that Mr. Harris was not directed by the board to pursue this expansion, but they were aware of the work he was completed in doing so. Mr. Fagan also stated that many of the overtime hours were spent on the phone after work hours with the district's attorney and consultants for the expansion project, which which project was not initiated or directed by the board. When asked if the commissioners reviewed any timesheets for Mr. Harris to confirm the amount of overtime that was being used, Mr. Fagan stated that a policy did not exist in which the board was required to do so. Instead, they monitored monthly profit and loss statements, which showed the amount of money being spent on overtime. Both Mr. Fagan and Mr. Rouse stated that any effort to expand into Chestnut Hill or the East Sevier County Utility District should not be pursued if it negatively affected the current operations of the Witt Utility District. Board staff is not able to comment on whether this expansion negatively affects the Witt Utility District due to insufficient information. On the morning of the July 18, 2023 visit to the Witt Utility District, board staff requested copies of the following documents, which could prove fruitful in determining the impact the Chestnut Hill or East Gut expansion is having on the current operations of the district. Checks issued since May 1, 2023, all current bank account balances, balances of all accounts payable, copies of any policies that have been adopted or discussed since May 1, 2023. Keep in mind, I did get copies of the draft policies and copies of all employee timesheets since April 1, 2023. The Witt Utility District employees were able to gather the copies as requested by board staff. However, the employees were directed by management to not provide any documents to board staff. Board staff were directed to request any needed documents from the attorney for Witt Utility District. This, despite that there is no investigation into the Witt Utility District, only into Commissioners Michael Rouse and Michael Fagan, and the criminal investigation into Mr. Harris and his brother. Board staff discovered after the June 2023 meeting of the Utility Management Review Board that Mr. Rouse's commissioner appointment expired in March of 2023. It is board staff's understanding that Mr. Rouse was appointed in January of 2016 and Mr. Fagan in February of 2017. Neither commissioner completed any annual training statements, which statements require a certified statement of the commissioner training taken in the previous year. If a statement is not filed, then the commissioner is ineligible to receive payments or benefits paid by the district. At this time, board staff is not aware of any payment or benefit paid by the district to either commissioner other than the monthly payment of $250 allowed to all utility district commissioners, but believes the commissioners did receive the $250 monthly payments. The below table details the monthly payment totals for the commissioner. So in this time period in which these commissioners were serving from essentially 2017 to current, Mr. Rouse, it appears that Mr. Rouse and Mr. Fagan have been illicitly paid at least $19,500 and $16,500 respectively, which funds are owed to the Witt Utility District. In conclusion, board staff finds that the ouster proceedings against these commissioners should be pursued. These commissioners should be ousted based on the findings of the investigative report, which highlights several deficiencies and oversight that ultimately led to findings of impropriety as detailed in the report, and the failure to make any changes to address the findings of the report or prevent future bad acts. Furthermore, board staff do not believe it's necessary to delay action until September 1st, 2023, as stated in the prior Utility Management Review Board. With that, the staff recommendation is the board should revise the UMRB June 2023 order to give permission to board staff and council to initiate ouster proceedings against the commissioners in question. The board should also authorize staff to cease or dismiss any proceedings should the commissioners in question resign or otherwise cease serving as commissioners. So board, ultimately what this boils down to is this. The commissioners say that they are making strides in improving the status of the district by making these potential changes to the policy. I don't disagree that that is a great way to respond to the allegations found in the investigative report. However, these commissioners also contend that the purpose of the MG Group report is to find deficiencies of the utility that need to be pursued. Furthermore, the engagement letter of the MG Group report says to verify the accuracy of the comptroller's investigative report. So board, I'm struggling with the idea of saying that we think that the investigative report could be inaccurate, but we are going to go ahead and change some policies and procedures to rectify what is in an inaccurate report. But now they're saying the MG Group is here just to find deficiencies found in the report. And if that's the case, why not wait until the MG report is completed to make any changes to policies or procedures? Ultimately, it is my belief that the findings of the investigative report could potentially be used in the defense of Mr. Rouse or Mr. Fagan in a contested case hearing, or optionally also in the criminal defense of Mr. Ben Harris, who was charged as a result of the investigative report. Board staff does not find it appropriate that utility funds are used to defend personally the individuals that have just been named. And so based on that, the idea that the utility could be getting into a web of spending money to defend these people personally rather than relying on their own personal counsel, it is not a great trend, and board staff is very concerned that something like this could continue. So based on everything that was just said, I think that the last requirement, the last order from the Utility Management Review Board asks that staff go meet with the Witt Utility District to kind of hear their side of things to see if ouster proceedings should be necessary. We satisfied that request. Now, board staff's opinion is there's really not a reason to wait until September 1st. I think that the case is clear, and we met with the commissioners, and we just don't think that based on the things that have happened with the MG Group and the changes that they're suggesting, along with the fact that none of this dispels the idea that failure of proper oversight in the years leading up to this led to the impropriety found in the investigative report. So based on those facts, that is what board staff is currently suggesting. So I'm happy to take questions now, or if you would like to hear from Mr. Branstetter.
I have one. Point of clarification. In the June hearing, they requested time to basically prove their case. I mean, I guess maybe that's not right terminology, but basically to state why the findings were incorrect. Yet you all go up there and their management would not even authorize the release of records. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yesterday, when we entered, yesterday morning, Mr. Ben Johnson, staff to the T-Bor, requested the documents that are laid out in this document. When we spoke with the employee stated, management said that I'm not allowed to give you any documents, that those requests need to be sent through the attorney. Honestly, I think that we had the legal grounds to take those records anyway. We don't need to make those requests through the attorney, especially because everything that we asked for is pretty much public record. However, as kind of an act of good faith, we said, no, we're not going to ask you to go against your manager because you were given a directive. And I just didn't find that it was right to ask her to go against management in that instance. So you are correct that we were there. Their idea was to essentially prove their side of things, yet they refused to give us the documents as requested.
And one other point of clarification, maybe I don't remember correctly, but when we were questioning their manager, and I think their legal counsel said the reason that they had allowed the overtime was because they were trying to evaluate what his salary should be for the basically 18 hours a day he was working. This almost contradicts some of that, at least in my opinion. Commissioners review any timesheets. They didn't do so. So how were they evaluating time if they weren't even looking? I'm missing something here. So it's just points for the record of my confusion. I'm sorry.
I got a couple of questions to piggyback on that too. If I understand this correctly, that Mr. Rouse's appointment actually expired in March and there has not been a submittal to the county executive or a reappointment to that point?
According to everything that we've obtained, no, they have not made the proper steps to try to get a new appointment to the board.
And since we were here from that time until your meeting, July 18th, the certifications of training, I think it was stated that they had the training, but they hadn't filled out the annual statements of compliance.
Mm-hmm.
None of that has happened in that time period?
We have not been provided those either.
One last question there, because I was the one who made the motion then on the UMRB to pursue the small stay to allow them to prevent or present compelling information there. In the time that's been there, did the board members not overrule management and said, hey, we're the manager's boss. If you need documents, I mean, did they willfully or knowingly sit there and just say, hey?
So I will say the board commissioners were not in the room whenever we were told that we were not being provided those documents.
I know that's the way my board works. I work for the board and then all staff works for me, but I think sometimes that gets lost in translation is I work for the board. They have authority to hire and fire me on cause at any time.
Did I also hear that the manager was pursuing projects without the consent of the board?
So I don't know if there was an actual vote to say, yes, management pursue expansion into this Chestnut Hill area. The board was cognizant of it. So it's not like that was occurring without them knowing about it, but I don't know if they ever voted to say, yes, start spending time outside of regular work hours to figure out how to get into this area. One interesting point that was pointed out to us yesterday is that there are both financial and engineering consultants on the potential project in the Chestnut Hill area. With that being said, I don't know why those services weren't being utilized to complete the work that was being done in overtime hours if you have engineering and financial folks that you're paying to look into the adequacy of this job, instead saying, well, we have these consultants, I don't want to use them, I'm going to do the work on my own.
But I also remember, I believe that Mr. Harris said the reason a significant amount of the overtime was because of, I want to say 12 miles of water line that was installed and they were working on that. There was no mention of any of this in previous hearing.
So not.
This is different.
And the project that you just referenced is what I understand to be called the Road Junction project. Okay, and I think yesterday that was referenced several times by the board members. I don't know, unfortunately, the timeline of when that occurred and how that played into the overtime, but you are correct. The whole Chestnut Hill area wasn't really part of the discussion that we had last month, as far as the overtime was concerned, a lot of it stemmed from the miles of lines that were being installed.
I remember correctly, that was the justification for almost all the overtime. Maybe I remember incorrectly.
I got a procedural question. If this board directs staff to initiate after proceedings and two commissioners refuse to resign and it goes into a contested hearing, these payments, commissioner payments, $250 a month, which equates to $19,500 and $16,500, will that be also petitioned to be reimbursed to the district?
So what I believe that the correct action would be there is if after the ouster, these commissioners were allowed to stay on at the Witt Utility District, I think the opinion would be that they need to pay back these illicitly paid out funds. But if these commissioners were ousted or if they choose to resign, I don't think this body would pursue repayment, and it would be up to the Witt Utility District to decide to try to regain that payment.
But how do we oust a commissioner who's not even legally supposed to be sitting in the chair now, nor should he be receiving payment now because he's not technically a commissioner?
That is a very good question, and I don't know if council has a good answer for that.
Whether or not he's been appointed, he appears to still be serving as a commissioner. And therefore, I think ouster proceedings against him are still appropriate, just with that as an additional grounds toward be removed. Okay.
I'll tell you, with all due respect to the members of this board and Mr. Brandstatter, anticipating sitting on this board, I actually attended the last UMRB, and I think it was extensively discussed, and it appears to me that we shouldn't belabor this any longer. And I'd like to put a motion on the floor to initiate our after position. Okay, please do, Mr. Bell.
As I was the one who made the motion to allow the stay then, and certainly I think there's additional compelling information here. I don't know if you need a rescinding of that one, but it's certainly to accept staff recommendation here to proceed with ouster proceedings. And I'll clarify that to the rest other board members. The reason there's two, the third board member that was there had been serving less than a year. And so that's why I had made that recommendation. Mr. Fagan, but I would move.
May I be allowed to address the board before you vote?
Up to the board.
I believe a short 5 minutes would be appropriate.
Okay. Well, first off, I'm very disappointed to hear that this is the staff recommendation when I've been talking with Ross about what we've been doing as far as implementing policies. The first time I could go to a Witt Utility District was their last regularly scheduled board meeting, which will be a week ago tomorrow on the 13th. We have prepared a number of policies that address some of the very specific things that were listed in the investigative report. They wanted to further consider those. One of their commissioners was out of town on a long planned trip and couldn't be there. So the thought was to wait until he was back and the commissioners could vote. We were going to try to schedule a special meeting before the next regular meeting, which would be on August the 8th. Doing all this with the understanding that we had until September 1st, within which to meet with Ross, talk to him, and then see if there would be a way to avoid the contested case hearing. In fact, Ross and I even exchanged emails yesterday about meeting on August 24th to go over all our complete response, which I'm in the process of preparing and working on. In an attempt to show that it would not be in the best interest of TBOR, I keep wanting to say UMRB, to proceed with this contested case hearing. So when I talked with Ross on Monday and we exchanged emails yesterday, I had no idea until just now that this was going to be the recommendation. And frankly, I feel blindsided and sandbagged. If I had known that this was going to be the recommendation, I would have come and attended the meeting in person. So I feel like we have been operating in good faith under a September 1 deadline. And I think that was what the UMRB voted a little less than a month ago, or actually a month ago on it was on June 16th is when the UMRB voted to do that. And I would request that you give us that time within which to respond. That is the time frame under which we understood we had and we have been operating. And to say that, well, you haven't done what you should have done when, frankly, my schedule has not allowed me to go to WIT before their last board meeting. And I think it penalizes them because of my scheduling and ability to get there. And I think the appropriate thing to do is to wait the additional time, which is what the board had told us we would have the opportunity to have. There are other things I'm happy to respond to. The MG group has been hired. They're going to do the annual audit for the June 30 year end for WIT. And I don't think that was made clear. It sounds as if the implication is, well, you just hired these people to, look behind the comptroller's report. Well, that is part of it because they're going to do the audit for the year ending June 30th. I think there's more that I would like to respond to if I had been aware of this report. I downloaded the information this morning about 8 o'clock. It was not in the packet. And I think as a courtesy to me, if for no other reason, I would ask that the board give us until September 1st. And if come September 1st, the decision's made to proceed, then these two commissioners will have to make a decision as to whether they wish to, contest it or resign or just what they intend to do. But I think it would be not only unfair, but inappropriate to say, we gave you this time to get together and respond to the report, but now we're basically cutting it in half. And before I've even had a chance to sit down with Mr. Colonna, and Ross was out of town, I know part of this time, and I was in a hearing during part of this time. So it was just not feasible for us to sit down and talk. So my request is that you give us the time that we understood that we would have to respond. And I think not doing that is really unfair and inappropriate. There's no question that this utility district is a well-run utility district. It has very low water loss, no complaints from TDEC, no customer complaints. So there's no harm that's going to come to WIT's customers if you give us another basically 5 or 6 weeks. And that's what we're asking for. That's what the UMRB did in its very last meeting. And I would ask that that decision be affirmed. And come September 1st, if Ross says we're proceeding, then we'll say, okay, we had our chance to respond. We couldn't convince you. That's what we're asking for.
All right. Thank you very much.
So if I may respond, Dewey is correct. We had a great conversation on Monday, and we talked about the policies that are being looked at. And I have no qualms that they have not been adopted yet. However, even if those policies were adopted today, my opinion doesn't change. It doesn't change how WIT Utility District got here. It doesn't change that the commissioners voted to spend utility funds to hire someone to verify the accuracy of our report, yet to use the findings of our report to make potential changes to policies, although they're somewhat contending that our report is inaccurate. Because if the report isn't being contended that it's inaccurate, then there'd be no purpose to hire MG Group to begin with. Now, the implication that Mr. Brandstetter referenced as far as the audit is concerned, I have no implication about that. I have no issue with WIT Utility District contracting with MG Group to have a new audit firm. As a matter of fact, I think it's a great idea to switch up auditing firms every now and again to get a new set of eyes on the books. That doesn't change the facts of the matter. The fact of the matter is plain. It's that attempts were made and they're good attempts at fixing some of the problems. It doesn't change the fact that the problems exist, previously existed, and that to spend utility funds for the personal defense of potentially the manager and 2 commissioners, I just think is extremely inappropriate. And I think that was a poor decision by the commissioners and goes to speak to the poor decisions that they continue to make in trying to run the utility district at the cost of the customer.
So before we get too many more comments, I know our staff attorney would like to have a.
Dewey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Dewey, have you decided that you represent the commissioners now as well, or do you still only represent the district?
I'm representing the utility district at this time. And until a contested case is instituted, there's no need for them to have separate counsel. They are the utility, they are the managers of the commissioners of the utility district at this time. And once
it's appropriate for the district to spend their funds to ensure this contested case does not occur?
No, we are responding to a report presented by the comptroller's office that I think we have a right, that the utility district has a right to respond to if there have been allegations made. The main one is what they say is questionable disbursements, number 4, that we're trying to figure out what those disbursements were. And so to the extent that we are responding on behalf of the utility district to a report that is directed to the utility district, I think it's entirely appropriate for me as their counsel to be able to do that. I have done nothing related to Mr. Harris's criminal charges. I've not advised him. I'm not representing him. I do not do any criminal work. I haven't did early in my practice, but haven't in many years. So I'm not representing him, and I'm not seeking to defend anything or get any information related to his criminal case. And that's not what the purpose of as I understand, of what MG Group was doing either. Although there's been an allegation that MG Group was trying to get information that would be in his defense, and that from my position is simply not accurate. That's not something that I have attempted to do. But because the report is directed to the utility district, I think they have a right to respond, and that's what we're trying to do. And the thought was, if the response was adequate, then there would not be a need for a contested case hearing. And it may be that the mind has been made up and that there's nothing we can say or do. And I kind of feel like that's where it's headed. But by the same token, we have been operating in good faith, and it's not just policies that we're working on. There are other things that I'm doing in an attempt to respond to this report that I was hoping to have the opportunity to sit down with Ross. And again, yesterday he emailed me and said, that August 24th would be a day that he would be available. So I have been operating, I think, in good faith, trying to address some of these things.
If management was acting in good faith, why would they not release documents to staff?
That burns all that currency.
Every bit of that's burned.
Okay,
That trumps every
I
bit.
probably address that. I knew that Ross was going to meet with the commissioners yesterday. I said, if there anything specifically that y'all need to provide, let me know and I will get it for him. I don't know. I would have to ask Mr. Harris. I don't think he was there. I don't think he's the one that directed them not to give anything.
He was.
Okay, well then I've not spoke with him specifically about that. If he did that, he did that in error, and I would advise him, give them whatever they ask for. It does not need to go through me. But because that we have been in somewhat of an adversarial position, unfortunately, my advice to my client has been, let me know of anything, and if there are requests that are made for things, I should be made aware of that. And I think in my role as an attorney for the utility district, that is an entirely appropriate position to take. And having no idea that there would be a request, and I even told Ross on the phone, if there's information that you need, let me know and I'll get it for you.
And you're correct. We had that conversation at 5:30 p.m. on Monday. And I just was not able to get an email to Dewey that evening requesting those documents. However, it was provided to the utility district Monday morning.
Yeah. No, it couldn't have been Monday morning. It would have had to have been Tuesday.
Yesterday morning, excuse me.
Yeah, Tuesday. And I'll say, to give you an idea of how much I was attempting to comply with what my conversation with Ross at a little after 5 on Monday. I said I was not at my office or at my home office. I said I will send you the policies that we have done. I had a couple of other things I had to do. I think I emailed all that information to him about 12:30 in the morning, Tuesday morning, Nashville time. That was when I could get to it in an attempt to get it to him so he would have it the next morning. I don't think anyone could say that we've not attempted to operate in good faith in trying to respond. And I will tell you, if you asked for financial information and it was there and somebody didn't give it to you, that was a mistake. They should have given it to you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so the concern is, so what was the actual request that y'all went? Because it looks like this discussion happened in June. It seems like the request was at least kind of made then. This was a month later to basically pick it up, and it's still not available? Is that what's this? That's the gist of what's going on?
The request was made yesterday at the meeting when they were there. And I was told that the purpose of the meeting was just to have a conversation with the commissioners. Had I known it was going to be this detailed, I would have asked to be present.
So the document request was in fact made yesterday based on the June order from the UMRB directing board staff to meet with the commissioners to essentially hear their side of the story for all of this. Based on everything I was told, there is nothing that I think, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, shows that the commissioners did everything correctly from the start, right? Because that's what a lot of this is. It's not, hey, look what we're doing after the fact. That's great. Because I agree, those things need to be done. It doesn't change the fact that the problems occurred to begin with because the board failed in their original responsibility. And now here we are after the investigative report. And I don't think that the board understands how to act in good faith, because now they're spending utility funds to verify the accuracy of our report.
If I can, it's not to verify. It's not to verify.
That's what it says in the engagement letter, Mr. Brandstetter. That's what it says in the engagement letter.
I have not seen the engagement letter, but what I understand is that there were questions about the disbursements, and they wanted to know what the background of that was. And if there is, I think when look at number 4, I know you had it up there. It says identified at least 5243 in questionable disbursements. I know
that is one of 5 findings.
Yes, I know, and that was one of the things that that we were trying to determine what those were. On number 5, I am preparing a response about what happened with the district with the work that was done, where it said there was a failure to get seal bids under A and B. That I think is an appropriate response as to that part of the report. Also on C, some of the numbers on the roof question, I think, are inaccurate. I had been preparing a response on that to show that not only that we are dealing with and addressing the issues where there are deficiencies, but where we may want to explain or say this is where we disagree that the severity of this finding is appropriate, that we're trying to respond to that. And again, I feel like I've been blindsided, and I'm certainly glad that I was listening to the meeting and have a chance to respond, because I've been operating in really good faith on the fact that we had a certain amount of time to respond, and I feel like to come in now before I've even had a chance to sit down with Ross, and he didn't tell me he was going to meet with them specifically to get their response to the comptroller's report. If he had done that, I could have provided him with more information, and we'll be prepared to do that. But I thought I had until September 1st, and I thought we were going to do that on August 24th, which is the day that he emailed me yesterday and said he would be available.
And Dewey, I'm still more than happy to meet with you on August 24th. I mean, we can still talk about this at length on August 24th. Just the facts of the matter is, I, as board staff, was directed to visit the Witt Utility District to talk to these commissioners in response to the investigative report. That occurred. I attempted, I did attempt to contact you yesterday, and I understand that you have plenty of other clients and you can't just give this one your sole attention. So I don't fault you for not being able to speak with me yesterday. But I also shared with Mr. Fagan that Witt Utility District would be on the agenda today. And so I feel like he, as your client, could have also told you that, hey, I'm being told that we're on the agenda. Regardless,
I'd
Mr.
like
Hampton, I
to, I'd like
believe
to
had a question.
respond to that. I would really like to respond to that, Ross, because what you told me on Monday night when we had a conversation was Witt Utility is not on the agenda, but I expect because Anthony Pelham and Bruce Giles have been appointed to T-Board that they may ask a question about it. And so, again, that's part of how I feel like if you had said to me on Monday, I'm going to meet with these two commissioners to specifically address what the UMRB did on June 30th, then I would have said, great, let me also either be there or give you the additional information. I had no clue from you that this was going to be the meeting at which you were going to make a decision as to whether to go forward with the contested case or not. I think that is my disappointment, because if I had understood that, I might have been prepared today to have provided information that, frankly, I'm just not in a position to do, because I haven't, I wasn't prepared to have this conversation with T-Board.
Okay, I think we can move on from here.
But we have the authority to remove those commissioners just for the educational thing alone, correct?
One could make that argument, and that would be heard in the contested case hearing. That's when those individuals will have the opportunity to defend themselves during the contested case hearing.
So irregardless of all this other stuff, they didn't meet the educational requirements.
Potentially.
They
They provide documentation.
They didn't, yeah, we didn't provide documentation.
All right, I think we had the beginning of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I think for the other additional reasons and additional things that have come forward today, I would make the motion to accept staff recommendation to proceed with ouster of the two board commissioners.
We have a motion to proceed with staff recommendation
I'll second.
and a second. Any discussion? Being all those in favor of accepting staff recommendations to proceed with ouster, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I know for the record, I abstain.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, board, moving on to the next phase, and hopefully this should be pretty speedy. Should be, but I thought this meeting was going to be over about an hour ago, and here we are. We are now moving into the portion in which the East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and West Tennessee analysts will be discussing their cases that are in front of the board. You'll find that a lot of these cases have the similar recommendation of simply pushing a rate study to December 31, 2023. So how I would like to proceed is, instead of voting on that one single recommendation every single time, we're going to wrap all of those up at the end of the three presentations into one vote to extend all of those rate studies to that December 31st, 2023. So if we see one just with that one-liner recommendation, we're not going to take an action as long as the board's okay with that. But everything else, we'll go through it individually. So at this point, I think Ben Johnson can come up. We're on page 63.
Yeah, so good afternoon. Ben Johnson, like Ross said, I'm part of the east side of the state as far as utilities goes. The first one, and Ross also may have said something about this earlier as well. A lot of these we're just kind of going to go through and provide a quick update. Of course, you all can have discussion. Decisions can be made about those. But either way, like this first one here, Bristol Bluff City, they have been under financial distress since 2022. They've been actively working with TAUD to improve overall operations. Board staff is confident in the progress that the entity make with the assistance of TAUD. And they're currently also working with Jackson Thornton to complete a cost of service study, which is evaluating a merger between the entity and South Fork Utility. Are there any discussion on that. Like I said, just kind of gonna give updates and y'all just stop me as needed. If not,
Any board comments on the first one?
we'll continue on then. So, moving on from there, Clear Fork Utility District. So this one, they've been referred for financial distress since 2018. They've had several years of delinquent audits. The most recent audit that's available is from 2018. They have not returned their financial distress questionnaire when they were previously issued this. In December of 2022, the UMRB issued orders for the entity to contract with third party immediately to ensure financial health of the entity. However, they have failed to comply with this order. So we do have staff recommendations on this. Now, these are not December 31st. These are a little different. And there is also one point that I do want to make because there is an error or correction that needs to be made on a due date here. But generally, we are asking that the board should order the following, we could issue subpoenas for the entity's governing body and a merger to appear in person before the board during its next meeting. The entity shall contract with TAUD or another qualified expert to carry out a feasibility study for the merger with another utility system in the area by September 31st, 2023. So this is a new date. Following that, the entity shall provide a complete feasibility study to the board staff by March 31st, and this should stay 2024. So a new timeline here. And another provision of this as well, we're recommending would be that should the entity complete all of the items from the previous order by the next board meeting, the subpoenas shall be withdrawn. So if they do show good faith in a timely manner, we could withdraw that subpoena.
Could we add something to the effect of the next step is Chancery Court?
I don't think it'd be necessary to add that to the order. That's the normal order. If we're not able to enforce something at this level, we would refer it to the AG's office for them to take the Chancery Court. I think we could mention that in the order, but I don't think it's necessary to add anything to it.
Okay.
Along the lines of Mr. Moss's question, if this matter needs to be referred to the Chancery Court, would the board have to take action at a future meeting for us to start the process with the Attorney General's office?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Did you say it's going to be referred to the Attorney General's office?
Yeah. Just as a matter of precaution, you could take a vote to, I guess, amend the vote or something like that to request staff to pursue this with the Attorney General's office and a Chancery Court.
That was my question. Do we need something to say if they don't comply? What's that do it? I think that it's fine.
If we want to add that, it's not a problem. That would be the most cautious route.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'll make the motion. We go with staff recommendation, but with that little verbiage about Attorney General's office. I just like them knowing there's a hammer back there somewhere.
All right, we have a motion to accept staff recommendation with the caveat of making sure that it was the March 31st, 2024, and adding the provision of referring to Attorney General with non-compliance. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion? None being, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, carrying on here. So Cold Springs Utility District, they were referred to the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation for financial distress since 2020. They have provided board staff with a completed rate study, but has not provided proof of the implementation yet. Of the resulting recommendations from that study, they haven't implemented those yet. The entity has also retained a lawyer. If you remember, they did have a case where they have 5 customers. They had water rights. Essentially, they weren't paying. They had rights to these springs that they are producing water from, right? And so we had asked in a previous order that they have their legal counsel take a look at what are the rights, if that's actually set up, and can they do that? So they have set aside somebody to take a look into this. They are also right now currently in discussions with the city of Mountain City for a potential merger between the two utilities. But as far as right now, this is going to be one that we were talking about extending deadlines to December 31st. You can see that, we're asking for a completed rate study with proof of implementation of resulting recommendations for that plan of implementation by December 31. Additionally, on December 31, we're wanting an update to board staff regarding its attorney's opinion on those water rights. Along with this recommendation, we're asking the authority to grant one extension up to 6 months. So we can, I guess, hold, if y'all are okay with that, we can hold this one, kind of just cut across. Can somebody make a note, just Cold Springs Utility is one that we're gonna include on there. Is there any?
Staff recommendation is just to wait till the next one.
Yeah. December 31, and like roll that in there. Okay. We'll come back and visit that on that vote as far as pushing those dates back. All right, so continuing on, the town of Cumberland Gap, again, this is another decrease in net position or financial distress since fiscal year 2021. So there was a November order issued by the Water and Wastewater Financing Board, and that was back, like I said, November 2022. Since then, they have contracted with Communities Unlimited to carry out a rate study. The rate study was the order from that previous WWFB meeting. That is due by July 31st, and so we're currently waiting on that. It's just kindly an update on there. We'll see what that says. Anybody have any thoughts? So, a lot of updates in here. Cumberland Utility District of Roane and Morgan Counties. Okay, so this was a administrative review that was opened up. So that was opened in April 2023 by the Utilities Management Review Board. A little bit of background: the entity received an unsatisfactory score on sanitary survey, listed numerous deficiencies. We've also been notified of apparent violations of Tennessee Open Meetings Act and the Tennessee Public Records Act. With that said, we have not yet been able to get out and carry out this investigation. Our plan is by the next regular scheduled meeting to have a full report with our findings about what's going on out there. Not a lot, but just a quick update as well on them. Was there any?
There should be an order going out this week or next.
Oh, TDEC as well.
Get you a copy of it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. So, that'll be another thing that we'll include in that report as well. But again, this is one where we are planning to get with them, and we'll update by the next scheduled meeting.
Mr. Chairman, just one question. I noticed administrative review and investigation mentioned in the same sentence. We are on Cumberland Utility District, correct? I might have got diverted by looking at.
No, yeah. Cumberland UD.
It's kind of a misnomer because they're in Roane and Morgan County. It's not, when I hear Cumberland, I think Cumberland County. It's in our Knoxville area.
Well, I guess my question though was, are they under criminal investigation?
No.
Okay.
Again, it's when it was previously open, it was called, when the order originally went out from UMRB, it was called an investigation, and that's previously how it was termed. Since then,
understand.
Administrative review, that's the language. So you kind of get conflicting in the write-up there, but it's not a criminal investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One thing that I do want to add, Mr. Perkey, is, and I failed to share this earlier when I talked about the board's responsibilities. We do have a responsibility anytime that the Comptroller's Division of Investigation releases a report about a utility district. Board staff has to bring that in front of the board.
I understand.
And then at that point, we could. I just wanted to let you know that at that point, we do, if there is a.
I understand. Perhaps a better word would have been inquiry there, but I understand that we're in transition here.
All right, moving on. All right, so East Sevier County Utility District. This is one that was, there was an order that went out in December 22, and I'll just kind of read through this they've been placed under administrative review with the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation for an investigation that was opened by the UMRB in August of 2022. The entity has a long history of frequent service outages, customer complaints, water quality issues. They similarly have a long history of excessive water loss. Since the initial order was issued, the entity has engaged with Witt Utility District to improve their operations. However, the entity is still currently experiencing difficulty finding internal staff to manage operations, and the entity is also seeking out funding sources for necessary infrastructure upgrades. So going back to December 22, the UMRB did issue an order for a rate study to be completed. And again, in April of 2023, that order from December of 22 was amended to include preliminary examination of the feasibility of a merger between eScud and any nearby utility systems. However, the December 22 order did not specify a contract date, nor did it specify a date of completion. So the board's previous orders needs a contract date and completion. So this is a bit of a cleanup deal right here. Like I said, we just need to tie in some dates so that we can see that this gets carried out. And so essentially the order would still stay the same as it was stated at those previous orders from the UMRB. The entity shall have either TAUD or another qualified expert approved by board staff perform a rate study. Number 2 also includes that language from the April meeting about the feasibility study. The examination of a feasibility study of a merger between the entity and other nearby utility systems. And what is going to be, the big change again is the date. By October 31st, 2023, the entity shall send a copy of a contract between the entity and qualified expert who has performed tasks in paragraph 1 and 2. And by March 31st, 2024, they shall provide a copy of the completed rate study with either proof of implementation and a recommendation proposed plan of implementation. Is there any questions about that? I know that was kind of confusing, so I certainly try and answer. Sure.
Not about your recommendation. It's just that the discussion here says that there was an order issued for them to engage with utility. I know we just had a very long discussion about WIT. So the operations, the daily operations of the utility seem fair, and not to distinguish, which is a different contrast from what the board portion has been doing by the ouster. Because it seems really odd to say, yes, engage with them, but when they're having board concerns.
So we didn't order eScud to contract with WIT. They did that of their own volition. What occurred, the East Sevier County Utility District was previously engaged with this group called Alliance Water Resources for complete management and staffing of the utility. They were not doing a fantastic job. Okay. So that contract was dissolved between the two entities, and eScud at that point looked around for assistance and engaged with the WIT Utility District to serve them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ben, these orders or these staff recommendations to, play off what my colleague just said, none of them have anything to do with the utility.
They do not.
Is that fair to say?
No, like I said, this is just asking for a rate study to be carried out. We had interest in it, or, the board had asked back in December, we just want to see what's going on with the rate study, where they're at. And so that was where this initially came. And this is just, like I said, it's a cleanup, asking them to go in there, provide this rate study as well. And we did think it was be prudent to go ahead and add the feasibility study back in April. That was voted on as well. And it's just putting dates along.
One thing that could perhaps involve the WIT Utility District is the feasibility study. Since the WIT Utility District is currently involved with eScud, a feasibility study is merely looking at all the surrounding utilities to see which mergers are feasible. So are you asking from a conflict of interest standpoint? To err on the side of caution, I think it might be okay for you to just step back from this one, just to err on the side of caution.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there's no more discussion. I move to accept staff recommendation to clean up those dates and put the deadlines in place for that prior action.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendation to clean up the order that puts the dates on the East Scud. So any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I would abstain because of the potential conflict of interest.
Thank you.
So carrying on, Hallsdale Powell Utility District, I do want to make mention, Mr. Cardwell is joined us along with some of his staff today, so they are in attendance. We appreciate that. But they were placed under administrative review in April of 2023 by the UMRB. Just a little bit of background, they have experienced approximately 46% water loss in the previous year. The entity also has higher user rates and high debt to income ratio. What I want to say about the administrative review, myself and Ross went back in June to meet with them about the matters listed above. At this time, we have not completed that report with findings. I will say they have been able to provide all the information that we've asked for. They're here today. We are hoping to get that report finished up with findings by the next scheduled meeting. But just an update on that as well.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
The next is Intermont Utility District. So they are under the supervision of the TBOR for financial distress. Currently, the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts is finalizing a rate study, and that's going to be due at the end of the month. But this should be extended until December 31, and this is going to go along. Can we go ahead and just add them to the, but yeah, so just, again, this is amended on there as well. And so we can come back to this. It's just kindly changing that date. Mooresburg Utility District. So they've been referred for financial distress since fiscal year 2020 audit. The UMRB rescinded the 2021 order and issued a new order in December of 2022. Since that order in 2022, Mooresburg has complied and has timely completed items from this order. The entity is contracted with Jackson Thornton for a rate study, and that's to be completed by September 1, 2023. They've submitted their annual information report, which was another item that they had to work on. They've got that in, and they have provided proof of commissioner training. They're delinquent in their fiscal year 2022 audit, but otherwise, we are hoping to get more information as they can continue to complete their order. Like I said, they have complied to this point with everything that's been issued.
Thank you.
Another update with the town of Oliver Springs. So they've been referred for financial distress going back to 2021. And then there was also an investigation opened by the WWFB in March of 2023. And that translates, they are currently under administrative review. A little bit of a background, the entity's audits have been delinquent for years, and the entity has not verified that its rates are set in a manner to improve its financial condition. The entity has reported non-revenue water loss upward of 77% in its 2021 AWWA reporting worksheet.
And that's not a typo.
That is not
Not a typo.
Wow.
That is not a typo. The entity has timely contracted with a third party to carry out a rate study. And I will say as well, as a part of that administrative review, we did meet with them back in June, but we're getting that report ready with our findings, and we'll have that ready at the next scheduled board meeting. Well, and I think what that is, we're planning to detail some of that. I mean, we spoke with, they do have a new mayor that's been appointed, or he started in last year. So they've got a new mayor. They've also got a new town manager that's come in. They ousted their previous town manager. From what we understand, there were some issues with his leadership style and some of the things that he was doing to address the water system. But they do have an interim manager. They're going to hire him on full time, from what we understand, I believe, in September if he fulfills everything that they brought him on to do. But we do feel like they're making steps in the right direction, but they have certainly an uphill climb. And so moving on to the town of Parrotsville, an update on them. They've been referred to the T-Board for financial distress going back to 2017. This entity previously demonstrated inability and unwillingness to comply with any board orders. But however, this is another case where a new administration has come in. So we've got a new mayor over there. The entire staff has pretty well been turned over. They've certainly been a lot more receptive to answering their phone and talking to us and being willing to understand what they've been ordered. I did want to put an update. They have complied. In March 2023, we rescinded their previous orders and sent out a new one to them. That was issued by the UMRB, and they are contracted with TAUD to carry out a feasibility study with a potential merger of surrounding utilities. And that's going to be due by December 31.
Thank you.
Could I go back to Oliver Springs, especially since Eugene came back? I'll go back to my recall. Didn't we have some discussions about, I know in the feasibility study, but did we not have some discussions to WWFB about encouraging them to look into a possibility of some type of feasibility? Did we do that, Ross? Do you recall, Eugene? Seems like we did.
Yeah, because
It's the order setting.
Yeah, we certainly discussed that option.
But I think that was another thing where we don't really have any teeth for it. So it was during the administrative review, we can suggest it to them, but there wouldn't be any.
But we do now. That's my point.
Now we do. So
The city of Oak Ridge sits very close to them. I actually used to work for the city, and even from a hydraulic grade line, I'm not sure that you can't solve some problems there.
Well, they use Bacon Springs.
Right.
And that's not that impressive. I've been there.
Yeah.
I think that may be something that the board may want to consider, is adding that to the order as that feasibility study. Your staff thoughts?
I don't see a single issue with doing that. I think that it would be prudent. I would recommend, if we were to add that language, for the town to contract with a third-party consultant for a feasibility study into possibly Oak Ridge and other surrounding utilities because are they under a rate study right now? Yeah, so I don't want it added into the rate study because that could delay the rate study, but if we could make the feasibility study due March 31 of 24, I think that should give adequate time. I'm happy to cut that time down and add in an extension clause. So we could say, potentially by 12/31.
I was thinking we move it to December. That's what I was thinking.
So if we want to do that, but then add in the ability for us to provide an extension.
Yes.
Just in case it's
I concur
necessary.
with that.
Okay. So
we talked about that.
To be clear, for if anyone wants to make the motion for this, the staff recommendation is now that the town shall contract with a third-party entity to conduct a feasibility study into a merger with Oak Ridge and or other surrounding utilities. The feasibility study is due to board staff no later than December 31st, 2023. Board staff is able to give one extension up to 3 months. I'll recommend one extension up to 3 months upon a showing of good cause by the utility. That is now the staff recommendation.
I'd like to make that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff recommendations for the town of Oliver Springs to contract with a third-party entity to conduct a feasibility study due December 31st, 2023, possibility of a 3-month extension. Second, do we have any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I apologize for.
Not at all. It's fine. South Fork Utility District. So South Fork, they were created by a merger between Holston Utility District and South Bristol Weaver Pike Utility District. On April 7th, 2022, our office released an investigative report relative to them. Since the report was released, the entity has hired a new manager, Mr. Adam Hill, to serve as general manager of the entity. Additionally, the entity has complied with UMRB orders that were issued back in December 8th of 2022. And for the UMRB members that are still in this office, we did hear from Mr. Adam Hill at our last scheduled meeting. And, you know, I think he was able to provide some of the things like that, you know, their delinquent audits. They're trying to get those all caught back up by August 23rd. You know, they're working with rural development on a loan for capital improvement projects. You know, water tanks is one of those projects and replacing lines. They're setting up a GIS system as well as a telemetry system, and they've contracted with third parties for their billing and after hours call. In addition to those, a feasibility study for merging with Bristol Bluff Utility District is underway. Sure.
So your first sentence says that the South Fork was a merger between these two different ones. How recent was that merger?
2020 is what I want to say. And so I think that their first month in actual operation, I think it was January of 21. I'd have to double check. So it's very recent. South Bristol, Weaver Pike, and Holston were both failing utilities, as it were. And then they combined to create a pretty bad utility. Luckily, though, because of the investigative report, those board members have since been removed with the exception of one who's a new board member. And they are no longer using the general manager, who was the subject of a large part of that report. And so because we got new board members in there, new manager, the district is actually improving.
They made leaps and bound changes just in the last 12 months, so.
All right, so at this time, they don't have any financial records.
So they don't, and that's whenever South Fork was originally created, the records were just, you just couldn't get through them. So I don't have a single doubt in my mind that South Fork is doing everything right now to get those audits completed. I just have no concern from South Fork.
They've actually got some professionals on the ground now who's assisting them. I actually checked in on this recently, and they're trying to recreate this and establish a system moving forward that's significantly better than nothing they had before. So.
But all of that, then we're still recommending that they merge.
Yeah, because they currently buy all of their water from the Bristol Bluff City Utility.
There's really no point in there.
Yeah, so, and it's a smaller
system.
Yeah, no, potentially it would benefit everyone in the community, but that's what the feasibility study is here to find. Because there was an original feasibility study completed for the South Fork Utility District, and it found that the ratepayers are going to save money if a merger is completed. And so now we just want to make sure on the Bristol Bluff City side of things that that is still the case as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Megan here for the
All right.
Middle
I'm
Tennessee
Megan. I do Middle Tennessee. I work with LGF as an analyst and obviously service board staff. I'm going to try to go faster than Ben. This is like a marathon of a meeting. You guys must like us because we don't even give you snacks. So I'm going to. First one is an update for the city of Deckard. I take that back. I'm not actually making a motion.
I'll bring
Sorry.
them next time. Yeah.
For their water and sewer fund or their system. They've been under the board since their 2021 audit for financial distress. In the most recent order on March 23rd board meeting, we had asked for a list of their itemized expenses because we wanted to see why things were expensed versus capitalized. They had sent us the information. It was actually incorrect. Long story short, they've sent us over new material and we're still going through it. It's about 300 pages. So just an update there. If there's no questions, I'm going to keep going.
Is it changing that position correct? That -3?
Yes,
Well,
that's why we're looking.
okay.
They expense things.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Finding in their own.
Okay.
Next up, Town of Gordonsville. Their sewer fund, they were referred in 21. They have been working with rate studies to complete the ordered rate study. We've confirmed that. This is, again, just an update that they anticipate that rate study being completed and sent to the town by the end of July. We see no issues or problems with the town complying with the rate study recommendations. And so there's no board action needed at this time, just an update here. Town of Linville. So the town of Linville was referred since their fiscal year 2020 audit. We have had significant difficulty in communications and just getting information from the town. They have had significant turnover. Originally, TAUD was contracted to complete the order of requirements, but there was a severe lack of organization and adequate record keeping. So there have been a lot of delays. They're missing their most recent 2022 audited financial information. So at this point, this is kind of a cleanup, like let's just start over. We'd like to request a new rate study, and it should also contain a feasibility study for them to potentially merge with the surrounding utility. This entity is also out of compliance with completing that annual information report. We have attempted through multiple emails, phone calls. I have been there in person. I don't quite understand what the problem is. I heard from them on July 10th that they had contracted, or not contracted, but communicated with TAUD for TAUD to come help them about the form. I have not had the experience that you need TAUD to fill out a 5 to 10 minute form. But that being said, we're hoping that it gets completed. So staff recommendation is as follows. I won't read, all this verbatim, but it's pretty standard rate study language with that feasibility study added. We're asking by September 29th that they send us a contract of the qualified expert they're going to contract with. By March 30th, that they would send us the completed rate study and proof of implementation. By August 15th, we are asking that they complete that annual information report. I don't see any reason why it should be past that. Should they fail to comply with this, we are asking for some subpoena language and freedom here to ask the manager and the governing body to come forward if the ARR is not completed or the rate study deadlines. And there is extension language should they need it of up to 6 months if we see that they're really making an effort to need that.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept staff recommendation with respect to Town of Linville.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff recommendations as written for the Town of Linville. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Board. Moving on to the Town of Petersburg. This is another update. Their water system is under the board's authority. They have been under us since 2019. They previously complied with directives to have a rate study done, and they were released from the board, then brought back under the board because they had a negative change in net position in 21 and 2. So the most recent order was from March 23rd, and we ordered the town to complete another rate study to ensure that their rates are sufficient, if they need revamped or anything, and to examine the potential for a merger with Fayetteville Public Utilities. They have given us that contract. They are working with Jackson Thornton, and we have no other recommendations at this time. Quebec Walling Utility District. Their water system is under us since the 2021 audit. They are working with Jackson Thornton. This is one of the ones I think we're going to roll in to the end. We're just asking for an extension on that rate study deadline for Jackson Thornton. City of Red Boiling Springs, their water and sewer was referred to the board for financial distress since the 2020 audit. They have contracted with TAUD to complete their rate study. We are waiting for that to be completed. We have confirmed that TAUD is finishing that up, should have it done soon. This is another order deadline being extended that we're going to roll into at the end. The one thing is they're in non-compliance with their training requirements. We reached out in June, we got nothing back. And so there is some language in here that by September 29th, we would like board staff to, we would like proof from board, sent to board staff that all members of the utility have complied with the training requirements. So I'm not sure if we want to vote on this.
What about
all now?
Quebec Walling?
I'm sorry.
Quebec Walling? Did you skip over it?
No, we just did that.
No, we just did it.
Oh, okay, I'm getting.
I'm sorry.
We just added that recommendation into the list of all of.
We're rolling it all, yeah.
Okay. The sugars crashed.
So this one we can, should we vote on this one now? Because we're also extending the deadline.
Yeah, let's go ahead and vote on it.
Okay, so we are asking the board to order the following. By September 29th, we would like proof of training. And then we have subpoena language in there that at the next meeting, if they can't comply with number one, that the manager and governing body would come to the board. And that if they show compliance, we are willing to release them from the board's authority.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt staff recommendations.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendations for the city of Red Boiling Springs. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Moving on to Southside Utility.
So the Southside Utility District, if y'all remember at the beginning of the meeting, I said that there was a gentleman here that wanted to address the board on behalf of the Southside Utility District. I spoke with him whenever we took our break, and he said there was no need for him to address the board once he kind of read over more of what was going on. So I just want to make it clear, we don't have to take a break for him to address the board.
Southside Utility District was originally under the UMRB for financial distress in their 21 audit. We just got that questionnaire back from them, and we have the following concerns. They have not had a rate study in the past 5 years. They did raise rates in July of 21. They believe that they can alleviate this financial stress with the raising of rates. They've noted that TAUD did do a rate review to determine what the rate should have been originally. This is kind of a formal order and just our due process when someone's brought under financial distress. So standard language, TAUD or another qualified expert to complete a rate study in the following policies. By September 29th, we're asking for a copy of the contract. By June 30th, we're asking for the completed rate study and proof of implementation, and then we have extension language in there.
On this one as well. Make a motion, we accept the staff recommendation.
We have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendation for Southside Utility District. Any discussion? Dean, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Moving on to Tarpley Shop Utility District. This was originally one investigation, now an administrative review. We are basically asking for the board to allow us to add a feasibility study to their current rate study, essentially.
It's the one where the contractor and the wife are here and how.
Yes. Yes.
Move to accept that recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendation for Tarpley Shop Utility District. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Almost there, y'all. We're almost there.
I appreciate everyone sticking around with us and being patient. Hopefully further board meetings aren't quite this long. As Ross mentioned, my name is Nate Fontenot. I am the utility analyst for West Tennessee. And so I'm just gonna go through these quickly, and a lot of these are going to be rolled into that cumulative order at the end. The first one is the city of Adamsville. They have been underneath the Water and Wastewater Financing Board since the fiscal year 2020 audit. They've completed all prior directives. There's really no issues. It's just TAUD finalizing that rate study. And then we're recommending to the board that that deadline be extended to December 31st. So is there any questions or comments on this? Moving on, Town of Brighton, very similar situation, just a little bit more unique. They've been referred since their 2018 audit, so a little bit longer of a period of time. They've had a lot of delinquent audits for several years, which has caused difficulties in completing a rate study. The entity is now current with the audit submissions, which is great to hear. They've completed all prior directives. They're working with MTAS to complete a rate study. Again, this is one that's getting rolled into that final order, and we're recommending that that due date be extended to December 31st. So any questions with the town of Brighton? Awesome. Moving on. We have the city of Galloway. Galloway's has been underneath the Water and Wastewater Financing Board and now under TBOR since the 2021 audit. They've completed all prior directives. They have contracted with MTAS to complete a rate study. This is another one we are asking board to extend the due date until December 31st. Any questions regarding City of Galloway? So Town of Gates. Town of Gates has been underneath the Water and Wastewater Financing Board for a long time now, since 2015. And of course, now they still are underneath the TBOR. They have complied with board directives in the past, and they are currently in the update cycle. And as Ross kind of talked about earlier, we look for those 2 years of increase in net position. That really has never occurred, unfortunately, for the town of Gates. And in the past 2 years, if you look at the packet, on 2021 and 2022, you can see they again have had 2 consecutive years of decrease in net position. 2021 was only about a $500 loss. 2022, though, was a pretty significant loss to the point where that even exceeded their depreciation cost for the year. And so we are recommending that the board should basically do another rate study, or should order a rate study, just so they can see what has changed in the utility, whether it's been increase in expenses, whether it's been a decrease in customer count, whatever the case may be. We're recommending that the board should order following. You can see there underneath staff recommendation by September 29th. We're asking for a contract. We're also asking that they shall provide proof that all members are in compliance with the training requirements, because you can see underneath that summary, they have failed to show proof that all members. From my understanding and talking with the mayor and city recorder, it's really just one member who's refusing to get the training. He's aware of it. They've made him aware of it, but he's just refusing to comply with our training or Tennessee law training requirement. So that's also in the order for September 29th. By June 30th, 2024, the entity shall provide board staff with completed rate study and proof of implementation or other resulting recommendations or proposed plan of implementation. We have the authority to issue subpoenas if the of the manager and the board if they fail to comply with paragraph 3, which is that paragraph regarding training requirements. If the entity shows that they have complied with the training requirements, board staff, and if we're unaware for any reason for which the entity's training violation case should remain under board supervision, board staff may close the entity's training violation case without further action by the board, which would also close that subpoena language out. And then we're given the authority to grant one extension of up to 6 months upon a showing of good cause by the end. So any questions or comments regarding Gates?
Mr. Chairman, I would just, we discussed this earlier, but I would just ask our council to confirm whether or not we can order that they stop being paid. I mean, there is no reason for them to continue being paid if they do not complete the requirements. And I know it's a couple $100 a month, but I'm telling you, as a former county mayor, for every appointment you have to a utility board, you have 6 or 7 people wanting it for the $200 a month. So I really hope that we could get in a position that at whatever point staff identifies to the board that they're just snubbing their nose, that we order that they not be paid.
Would it be possible to frame language that council shall investigate whether or not we have the authority to prevent payment to these individuals? And if found to be so, then that paragraph of the order saying to cease payment to the individual payment until training occurs. You see what I'm saying?
See what you're saying. I would recommend instead, again, I think it's a really good idea. I just don't know that I'm ready to recommend it at this point.
So maybe we can just use that in the future.
I just don't want us to lose that thought.
No, sure, absolutely.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, it's a really good thought.
Mr. Chairman, with no other discussion, I move to accept staff recommendation. Town Gates.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendation for the town of Gates. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Awesome. So moving on to the town of Gibson. They have been underneath the utility board since 2019 audit. At this time, the entity has not filed its financial distress questionnaire nor its annual report. The entity is still behind on audits. I believe the last audit we have is actually 2020. So they're still a little bit behind, which has made it difficult to assess the current state of the utility. Board staff does not believe it is in the best interest of the utility nor its customers to wait until the audits are up to date. So we are advising today that the utility should go ahead and have a rate study. I do want to note that during our review, there is an outstanding interfund balance between the water fund and general fund. This is the general fund owes the water and sewer fund over $90,000. As the summary says, this seems to have been reported first in the 2015 audit. It is still outstanding, as I'm sure everyone here is aware, but if you're not, Tennessee code restricts municipalities from sharing revenues between government, water and sewer funds. So those are illicit transfers being made. And so at this time, that is part of the order to look into, to have that rate study done, to be updated to the status of the delinquent audits. And if Ross, if you, I'm not seeing this in here, but if this sounds okay with you adding in there just an explanation of that interfund balance, how they're going to pay that back.
So if it was first reported in the 2015 audit, we're talking almost 10 years now. And when we get, why wasn't this the repayment encouraged prior to this moment?
Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I don't know if a corrective action plan has been issued against the utility. There's a chance that as far as this board, well, the WWFP is concerned, we just weren't aware of it. That's something that we'll look into and update you at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I can speak that as the summary says, they've been late on audits. And so as of, I want to say a year ago today, they were only at 2018. I could be wrong there, but I know it's been very delayed in when we got the audits.
Is it an option to be late on audits? I didn't know it was.
It's just like it's an option to go the wrong speed limit. You shouldn't do it, but you're just breaking the law. And so as far as what Nate was just saying, we got their 2020 audit in February of this year. So I mean, they're well behind. That could explain why there hasn't been any action.
Why would you not retain a firm to catch you up?
A lot of people don't like spending money, Mr. Perky, and that's what it really boils down to. Is they think that they're equipped to do it, despite how many times they're told that they're not. But no, a strong local government would retain an accounting firm to say, get us caught up, let's figure out how to get through this. But they don't really. A lot of local governments don't take this requirement seriously, from my experience.
Is there anything our board could do to help that along?
Honestly, the best thing that we could do to help that along would be for two things. One, to provide money, which we can't, to pay for someone to get things sped along. We might have the authority to order them to contract with a firm, a third-party accounting firm. I don't think that we've ever done that before.
Isn't that just
Actually,
that's standard?
Gibson hired a CPA firm to do their bookkeeping, and they have auditors. So their 22 audit is due August 31st.
Okay. So it looks like that they are finally back on track. Maybe at the next board meeting, we can revisit this to see if they really are or not.
It's an observation here, Ross. So a lot of these are smaller towns. So you have the segregation between general fund, enterprise fund, and water and sewer, along with elected officials. And I know I personally worked in small towns. Some of them can be obstinate and say, well, you can't make me get training. You can't make me do this because I'm elected.
Yep.
And so I think that's going to be a small challenge to remedy this in some smaller towns.
That definitely plays a large part of it. We'll see how it goes. So, no, I don't think that there's any action needed right now as far as the accounting is concerned. We'll revisit this at the next board meeting.
Yeah, and so just to remind everyone where we're at, there's that August 31st deadline to update this board staff, the status of the delinquent audits. And I asked that we add in there as well to the interfund balance. And if that's been repaid, the plan to repay that be August 31st as well, if the board is okay with that. And then you have the September 30th deadline, which we're asking for the contract by June 30th, 2024. We're asking for a completed rate study and implementation. September 30th, 2023, we're asking that the annual information report be completed and is approved by board staff. Board staff, we have authority to grant extension up to 6 months with showing of good cause by the entity. And then we have that subpoena language in there as well. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept staff recommendation with respect to the town of Gibson to include the language that their response would have a corrective action plan to address the interfund transfer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the staff recommendations for the town of Gibson to include the language of the update on the interfund balance. Any discussion? And being all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Moving along with town of Gleason. This is going to be another one where we're extending the due date. Gleason has been referred since the 2015 audit as well. So they're a longtime member of the utility boards. The entity has had a series of delinquent audits similar to Gibson. The 2020 audit is the most recent one that we have. And I maybe get these two, I get mixed up because it's Gleason and Gibson and they're both delinquent on audits and been since 2015. And so the MTAS is completing the rate study, and we're just asking that the deadline be moved from July 31st to December 31st. Any questions or comments? And so we'll just roll this one into the list as well. Moving on to the town of Henning. The town of Henning has been referred to the utility board since 2020 audit. They're working with MTAS. This is just another one. They've been complying with all our directives, working alongside utility board staff. And so we're just asking that this one be rolled into that December 31st deadline as well. Any questions or comments? Hollow Rock is another one that we're asking to be rolled into December 31st. They've completed prior directives of the board. They have completed filing a plan to improve the water loss. They were underneath the Water and Wastewater Financing Board for water loss. They provided a plan to remedy the excessive water loss and are currently working with MTAS on the rate study. Any questions with Town of Hollow Rock? So we'll also roll that one into the December 31st list. Town of Hornsby is a decrease in net position. They are also underneath a administrative review by board staff. Currently, the town is working with MTAS to complete that rate study by December 31st, 2023. Board staff is still working on that administrative review, and we should have that update ready to go for y'all at the next regularly scheduled board. So any questions regarding the town of Hornsby? Moving on, town of Rutherford. Town of Rutherford has been referred to utility board since 2021 audit. They have completed prior directives. They're currently working with MTAS, and they have that rate study deadline December 31st, 2023. Any questions or comments? Moving on, Tennessee Ridge. This is another one we're going to roll into that list. They've been referred since 2021 audit. They're working with TAUD. We're asking that extension be moved to December 31st, 2023. Any questions or comments with Tennessee Ridge? I think this is the last one for West Tennessee. It's just another one we're going to ask to be rolled into December 31st. This is the town of Tiptonville. They have been referred to the utility board since 2020 audit. They're working with TAUD. They're completing and working with prior directives by the board. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Ross and issue that.
All right, y'all, last thing, we need to figure out when I get to see y'all again, and I know that after this meeting, y'all are stoked to come back.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to have at least one action to roll up everybody?
Oh, that's a good point, yeah. No, so, board, the recommendation that is now in front of you, the previous entities that were listed by board staff to be put in a list, one giant order that's going to go to all the utilities to say, hey, this July 31st deadline you got, we're just going to throw it to December 31. All the entities that were listed prior would receive that order.
Chairman, I'd make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept staff recommendations to extend the deadlines as so determined. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries.
All right, so now I get to figure out when I get to see y'all again. I proposed October 26th, 2023. That was just a date I pulled out. Typically, we do these meetings on Thursdays. I just pulled out October 26th. I thought it was decent enough. I would like to have one more meeting of this board prior to the end of 2023. So just looking for some sort of input, whether that works, doesn't work, y'all have a better date.
I can do that.
Works for me.
This is kind of crazy because like I've been in like 6-member board meetings and somehow one person ends up having a conflict. I got 9 of y'all on board. I am stoked. So with that being said, I really do want to apologize to everyone for how long this meeting went. It was very important for it to go this long because we got every single open case in front of the board. And so it was a lot of good work and I apologize again. It's only 4 hours. But yeah, so thanks everyone for your time. There's nothing else that I have to do.
I'll entertain a motion to
Make
adjourn.
motion adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Run. Second, third.